Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Board of Supervisors regular meeting for Monday, August 5th. If we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moment of silence. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'll put forward a motion that we adopt the agenda for our August 5th regular meeting, noting that this agenda in its current form is available to the public on board docs through the county website.
We do have two things, if you don't mind. We have an addendum item that is on H8, just bringing that to everyone's attention. There's also some folks in the room that need to get out of here a little quicker due to public safety and fire and rescue. And so I was hoping we could move items H1, 3, and 4 under public comment.
Madam Chair, I'll amend my motion to adopt to reflect those changes you just described in reordering the agenda.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 No opposed. All right, Dr. Grimsley, Superintendent report.
Good afternoon. It's been a little while. I hope you've had a great summer and tried to get away with friends and family. I know I did a little bit, so it's good to be back. So much has happened since our last report. We are returning to school after a very successful summer. Activities that happened over the summer were, of course, our summer school program, Pathways Academy, Band Camp, Summer Quest, and our inaugural rollout of the new Spark Camp. With nearly 150 students participating, Spark offered academic, social, creative, and fun activities for students every weekday all summer long. It was a huge collaborative effort between RCPS, Headwaters, CCLC, and 4-H, where each agency leveraged resources and raised the nearly $200,000 from over 7 different sources of funding in order to make this program a reality for the families of Rappahannock. Surveys are out now, and all who were involved with the Spark program are encouraged to provide feedback as we plan for next year's Spark Camp. Thank you all so much for helping support and advocate for this effort. It was a lifesaver for so many working families in our community this summer, so thank you so much. We are gearing up to start school next week. Much has been done in welcoming our new teachers and staff to Rappahannock County Schools. New teachers, as is customary, underwent an orientation to acclimate them to RCPS and are still going through that today and tomorrow as well. And it will provide essential training to begin the year. They spent time with their mentors who introduced them to essential knowledge about RCPS and even received a special bus ride from a surprise bus driver to their luncheon on the first day. We are so thrilled to have so many wonderful, talented staff joining us this year. Even with our higher than average turnover rate last year, I'm so proud to say that we are fully and completely staffed. All teachers and staff will return this Wednesday for convocation at RCHS, followed by a very busy back-to-school schedule with essential staff development, much focused on instruction as we work to close achievement gaps and behavioral gaps, implement the Virginia tiered system of supports, and roll out the Virginia Literacy Act. It will be a very busy but very rewarding year. Meet the Teacher Night is Monday, August 12th from 1 to 4 and 5 to 7. So please feel free to stop in and say hello to our teachers and parents, as well as see some of the continued improvements and updates in our facilities. We know you will be pleased. We welcome students back on August 14th for the first day of school. 2 things that I added to this before that I found out about before I could be here today. VSBA Excellence in Workforce Readiness contacted us, and we received 3rd place statewide recognition for the Aftermath, which was Cat Waters' program with the first responders at prom time, if you remember that program. So we just found out that we're being recognized for third place in the state. And number two, we did find out officially that the Rappahannock County High School is eligible for the Community Eligibility Provision Program, meaning that students at both schools will now be able to receive breakfast and lunch free of charge for families. Before I introduce a special guest really quick to meet you, do you have any questions for me?
Oh, you first, please.
I'm just curious how you all are responding. I believe it's Governor Youngkin's 033, the cell phone. I know that Mount Vista they're taking the bull by the horns and they're starting a new thing. They started school today and they're enacting their new cell phone policy today. I'm just wondering what our school system is planning to do.
Yes, so we have had a compliant cell phone policy. We have actually had that. Enforcement of it and some new rules with how those consequences will be handled will be talked about at our school board meeting next week.
Dr. Grimsley, thanks for the good news about being fully staffed, and it leads to the obvious question, which I'm sure you could anticipate I would ask, which is, what are we going to do as a county and a school system to get out of this cycle of recruiting good teachers? Everybody gets used to them, they get used to where we live and how we operate, and then we lose them, and then we're having to get back into the recruitment mode. And credit to you for filling your instructor roster so quickly and efficiently, but it does beg the question, how do we get out of this cycle next year and the year after?
Yeah.
The obvious area is compensation, which then leads to questions of budget, which we don't have to talk about right now. We'll talk about that a bit later in the year, but nevertheless, I think it would be good to hear from you if you have a plan and what that plan is based on.
Absolutely. So we have a priority within our strategic plan for that very thing, recruiting and retaining high quality instructors and educators here. It is a challenge. We are rural, we're in a different location, and surrounding districts do compensate quite a bit more. And that's been the issue we've had every budget time we talk about that, especially when the state has mandated increases that they give other districts a whole lot of money to do that and only give us 17% to do that. So that makes it really difficult. So the easy solution is pay our teachers like doctors. That would be great. But the other thing is to make our school system the best it can possibly be, so that the other benefits outweigh just compensation alone.
And to what extent have you heard anecdotally, to what extent does housing and the cost of housing in Rappahannock County weigh on the minds of those? Perhaps you learn these things through exit interviews, et cetera, but for those who've come and have left, maybe who are already commuting some distance, it's not an issue, but for those who expected to live here and work here and were not able to because of housing costs, how much of that is a factor?
More so now, I feel like. It has been for quite a while, but since we've seen the impact of inflation everywhere and everything, the commute may not be as worth it anymore. So we did hear that quite a bit, that the commute may not be as worth it with everything so high. And people were looking in different areas to offset those expenses, but personal expenses that every family is experiencing right now. So.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I did see a post about past students coming to be teachers this year.
We have them.
And I know there's at least 3. Is there more than that?
Yes, I believe we have, 4 this year. Yes.
That's exciting.
It's very
I wanna come
exciting. That's one of the greatest rewards, having our own people come back to teach. So, yes.
Shannon, I wanted to ask you about the Spark program.
Yes.
And I just thank you so much for rolling it out because I asked for summer long 9 to 5 childcare for our school age students, and you all were able to put this together, and it's just amazing.
Oh, I appreciate
and
that.
I think it was at 135 families.
It was
this year?
over 150 kids participated. yes.
Is there a plan to expand it next year? Because I think it filled very quickly.
It did fill up very quickly, so we're going to analyze the feedback surveys to see what we can do. Again, it was a mighty effort, $200,000 raised between the 4 agencies to make that happen. If we can expand it, we will. It's just going to be, a lot more.
Everything costs money.
Everything costs money, but there was so much support for it. I don't think it would be too much of a lift to get that. But personnel, making sure we have enough people, of course, with the ratios and counselors and workshop leaders and all of that. So,
Thank you so much.
absolutely, thank you.
Okay, now the big reveal.
And the moment you have all been waiting for. I am pleased to introduce you to our new RCHS principal, Dr. Mary Jane Boynton. As I'm sure you have read in the press releases and social media posts, Dr. Boynton comes to us with many years of successful experience as a principal in Prince William County. Dr. Boynton holds a PhD in education from George Mason with concentrations in literacy, long-term English learners, and educational leadership, a Master's of Education in Educational Leadership, also from George Mason, and a Bachelor of Education in Music Education from Glasgow University, Scotland. Please join me in giving a warm Rappahannock welcome to Dr. Mary Jane Boynton.
I would just like to say thank you for this opportunity. I have been blown away by how inviting and how just so welcoming everybody has been. I have spent the last week doing some one-on-one meetings and getting to know some of the staff, and the outpouring of support has been so amazing. So I'm very excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to a great school year.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome. All right, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, now we move on to the company 4 monthly report.
Thank you. Hi. So I want to report some progress and one setback. As far as the numbers are concerned, in July we had 17 EMS calls with 11 scratches, but on the plus side we had 8 fire calls and we got out for every single one of them. Our 6 EMTs are working hard for their precepted patient contacts and other experiences so that they can be released. The setback to report is that I had told you that they had to have, we all, since I'm one of them, we all had to have 10 supervised interactions, and it turns out to be 20. So, and fortunately, we don't have that many calls here. So some of our folks have been going to Warrenton and trying to pick up shifts with 1400 so that they can get the necessary contacts. We're hoping, I don't want to set a deadline, but we're hoping to keep moving on that. Once we have that, we expect to be able to do some transporting. We are upgrading our current ambulance to a medic unit, as we already have 1 medic and 1 paramedic, and they're precepting so that they can be released as well. So once they're released, we'll have that. We had support from the community continues to grow. We had our biggest event ever in the form of a fish fry early in July. And at the same time we did that, we did hands-only CPR demos for people that were interested. And some folks wanted to see how that works. And hopefully we did some recruiting for the class that is going to be offered in Little Washington. In an interesting instance of interagency cooperation, Rap at Home had a table at our fish fry, and they handed out a lot of information for folks and handed out a lot of refrigerator magnets so that when we go into people's homes, hopefully we'll know right where the medical information, the history, the allergies, that sort of thing is, and we'll see a lot more of those up. Let's see. And they handed out information as well. Can I answer any questions?
That's great. I guess my only question is I've heard through the grapevine that Company 7 is operating, I guess, what you call like what's the term? The rapid response.
That's it.
Thank you.
Good job.
I'm glad I can count on you to help me.
Yeah.
a rapid response vehicle that volunteers can take home and, if so qualified, can respond to a scene in that vehicle as an EMT. And I also heard through the grapevine that maybe you all are headed in that direction, and I was just curious
We've
where that stands.
we've taken a baby step in that way. Our utility vehicle, our current utility vehicle, is taken home by some of the EMRs. You remember that?
Okay.
Almost an EMT category, and they're responding to calls from their homes.
Okay.
So they don't have to go to the station and crank it up and then go. We haven't started to do that yet because we don't have with EMTs, but that's one of our hopes. Once we have some, that we'll be able to start scheduling shifts and have people be at the station and ready to hot-foot it.
Okay, and then I think once that effort really picks up steam and it's part of your regular response program, I think it would be important, and I don't know if it would be something that we do through dispatch or if it could be self-reporting from your company itself, but I think it would be important to try to measure the positive effect on reducing response times when such a vehicle is put into your system. And I don't know if there's a practical way to do that, but I know Mr. Stevens is here, so I think it's something that we all need to be mindful of, because to the extent that this model is replicated in other volunteer companies in the county and doing a cost-benefit analysis, it's important to understand what the bottom line effect is on response times.
I'm not surprised that you're looking for metrics. I turned around and looked at Darren. He'd be the one to ask about that, and also at the sheriff, because I think the dispatcher's recordings now would allow us to have that.
Okay.
We just need to collect those numbers.
Yeah, some kind of comparative analysis. What would happen if that same responder had to go to the station, pick up a vehicle, and then go to the scene of the call, as opposed to going direct? And
We could estimate the number of, well, the other positive effect is you're more likely to get somebody to go out, because it's a little bit, disheartening is too strong a word, but it's a little bit discouraging to be called out, rush to the station, get in the truck, call in and say, oh, you're back in service. They've taken care of it already.
yeah, that's a really good point. So there's that side of it, and then I think the one part we should be able to measure would be the bottom line impact of reduced response time.
Thank you for that, and we'll work on how to do that.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to go into public comment at this time. Anyone wishing to speak, please be recognized. And when you come up, give us your name and the district you're in. And I'll hold this to 3 minutes per person, please.
Lenny Janot, I'm in the Hawthorne district. I don't see Van here today. Sorry, I apologize in advance that I am not very fancy. I just kind of learned about this and roped in half an hour ago. So I wear many hats in the county, but I'm here today as the Childhood Cancer Awareness Advocate. Today, I work with an organization out of Richmond. We do a lot of awareness and advocacy work down at the Capitol to promote childhood awareness. There's over 385 kids diagnosed in Virginia every year. And one thing that they're trying to do is they're starting a campaign that's called Glow Gold. And the month of September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. And we are asking local organizations and prominent buildings and homes and businesses to light up for the month of September. And that involves going to their website, which I will send to you guys. And it would be, you take a pledge. There's a link on there from Amazon. You can push it and order your $10 globe or bulb. You put it on, and then you decide when you want to do, whether there's a week or the whole month, and you just glow gold and bring some awareness. So it's not a real big ask. It's pretty easy. We're hoping that maybe the courthouse will do it, and I'm also going to work with Stonewall Abbey. We have a few local families that have been affected by this, including my own. My daughter is actually at Camp Fantastic this week, which is at 4-H Center. And she is 10. She finished her treatments in November and is doing wonderful from leukemia. But we have another family that's near and dear to us. A local soccer player just graduated at 18, a Hispanic family. Their son has been, I think he's been in ANOVA for almost 3 months now. He had some pretty severe complications. He was intubated for about six days and on a ventilator, which is not a common complication. So we're really glad he's still here with us, but they could use some help. He used to box at Stonewall Abbey. So Stonewall Abbey is getting into this, and they're going to also do and awareness in the month of September. They're going to do an event, and we're going to join up with them, and hopefully Sperryville, we can get some of the businesses in Sperryville to light up and maybe also collect some money for that local family. But I'd also like to see if you guys would do a public proclamation for the month of September as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. So I'm here just to ask that, and then I will send a lot of information over to you guys. Is that all I say? Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, and I'm excited to hear all this stuff. It's all great. It's
And
a
we're
great
excited,
county.
we're excited Annie's doing so well. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
She's doing awesome, and she's
Yeah.
and many friends there that are doing great too. But I've been in the world a little too long to just walk away from it, seeing as many families that's been affected as I have. So, thank you all.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Anita Ramos, Hampton District. I've got a couple of things that are on the agenda today that I would like to make a comment or two about. You're looking at a policy about speakers, and one of the things you've put down is you will not deal with yielding. And I'll say the dirty word, Fairfax. I've seen where people have come as a group and have had one speaker, and people have yielded their time. So instead of having 5 speakers say the same thing, you get one speaker that can speak for the other 4 and can be a little bit more complete. And so if you can figure out a way to make it very official, I've seen it done with the school board, with the school districts, the elementary school groups and such, and I've seen it done very, very well. And it saves you all listening to the same thing over and over and over again. Second, speed cameras. They're doing a lot of this in Fairfax with, pardon me, bad word, around elementary schools. My local elementary school, which is only a block from me, where I hang out in Centerville sometimes, they've had a real difference in the amount of people speeding. And so you see that light go on, and you have the police getting a report that you sped through, and it makes people think twice. Cemeteries. I really don't know what Kier's going to talk about, but I'm an old semi-expert in cemeteries. I spent 25 years in Virginia room at Fairfax Library. When we first started there, we knew about 100 cemeteries in the county. By the time I retired, we knew over 460. And the number's gone up since then. We did a serious study that was required by the Board of Supervisors because the developers in said county were destroying cemeteries right and left, even ones that were known for years and years by just, oh, I don't know what happened to it. And they were getting destroyed like after 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It's the way it went on Fridays. So I've seen black cemeteries that were cornfields. So I really hope that you all will think hard about whatever is brought up about cemeteries to protect them. And last, County Park. I understand there's property next door that could be bought. Think hard. You don't get opportunities like this too often. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job.
Hello, I'm Ann McLean, Jackson District. I wrote some stuff down just so that I could keep to time, and I wrote it very quickly. It does not include all my thoughts, but I am here because as a teacher on summer break at the moment, I am able to attend and take notice of today's agenda, which does not seem to include a discussion by the supervisors of the Route 211 wrong way driving issue. I see that there is some evidence of some discussion and VDOT involvement in past BOS meetings and a mention in today's VDOT report. But as far as I can tell, board docs is very difficult for me to navigate. There has been limited discussion recently among supervisors, and most importantly, the problem remains. You may have seen the discussion of this topic on Facebook in the Rappahannock group. Back when I created a post myself about it in February, a gentleman reported to have broken his back by being run off the road. Many others since and before have noted that this has occurred to them. For just my own family, it has occurred 4 times now. Once my 18-year-old son. The most recent being myself last month. It seems to take place mainly in the Jackson district, but many citizens of the county are upset about it. Some say it is because of drunk driving or the vineyards. Others devolve into a discussion about signs. For my family, we have seen it turning left, well, lots of places, but we live on Benvenue, turning left. We go to where we're supposed to across the street and then turn left. And others just, we've actually seen people just turn left. And there's, of course, a blind hill right there. So good luck to them and other people coming. We have also seen it up by Colvin Road and further into Clevenger's Corner, which I do understand is a different county. But anecdotal evidence, personal passions, and the slow wheels of government are not enough. I have learned that this is not a new issue for Route 211, and yet the problem remains. To me, I just know we need a solution. It's a ticking time bomb, and I pray that you or me or anyone in this county or visiting this county will not be affected by a serious accident. Is there anything else on the agenda today as a matter of life and death? I have looked. Perhaps the wonderful work of our EMT and firefighters, sure, of course, but anything else? This is most certainly a matter of public safety. As citizens of the county, we look to you for answers and solutions. We have no one else, as far as I know, to turn to. Please make this a top priority until it is actually fixed. And only then turn your attention to the other very important matters of this county. Perhaps while you wait for VDOT, you could, here's some ideas, encourage the public to report each incident to the police. Request a report from the police department, if you haven't already, with statistics. Where and when is this occurring? Follow up with VDOT. Please give us a date in addition to locations of these possible signs or whatever they're doing. Ask for public input. And please alert the public about this somehow. You guys are smart. And definitely please keep discussing it among yourselves. Above all, I would like to suggest that until there are no more reported incidents of this nature on Route 211, why can't this be a standing topic of discussion at every one of your Board of Supervisors meetings going forward? If there is something more that a citizen of the county can do, like myself, please let me know. I suggest the RapNet Facebook group could be a good platform to get a word out if you need input or citizen involvement. This is not a partisan issue. I look forward to coming together as a community behind you to solve this problem. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. I would also like to thank you in general for all your hard work for this county I love.
Debbie, could I?
Thank you.
Don't normally.
May I?
Yes.
I was given special permission to respond. My name's Keir Whitson, and I'm currently chair of our county public safety coordinating body, it's Public Safety Committee. Fortunately, you just made your statement in front of 5 of the 7 members of that body. This has been placed with that group, which includes the sheriff, emergency services coordinator, 2 of us, Ms. Donahue and me, 2 fire chiefs, et cetera. And we have raised this with VDOT, and you might have seen reporting that I expressed some exasperation at our last meeting because after saying to VDOT in particular, you need to look at we call them the rollers over in the Amosville area and come up with something creative and new and fresh. Do a pilot, paint the pavement, have flashing signs, have spikes jump up out of the pavement. We don't care. Do something. Stop it. I've experienced it, and I think others on our body have experienced it. It's not something we don't realize is a problem, but what we've gotten from VDOT is we'll put up more signs. And considering we are having non-life-threatening or non-public safety discussions about signs in the county, I thought it was somewhat ironic that the solution is more signs, which frankly, I think desensitizes drivers. When they see more signs, they become more confused. So we take it seriously, and I appreciate that you so articulately describe the problem. I think you're right. I think it should be here with us. And if to the extent that we need to bring in the public safety folks with whom I work on that committee to affect a specific change in the way we're addressing the problem, fine. But I agree, and we will keep working with VDOT to figure out a real solution, because I'm not satisfied. I don't think anyone else is either. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, may I say something?
Sure.
I thought it was tragic when that woman was killed last year. I believe she was killed in that terrible accident in Amesville, going the wrong way.
I don't know if she was killed.
Was she killed or was it just a very serious
No,
accident?
serious accident, yeah.
And I took it very much to heart because anytime something like that happens, whether it's in the district that I represent or any other district, I try to figure out how these things happened and if there's something we could do better. And so on one occasion when I wasn't driving, when my husband was driving our vehicle and we were coming that way, I counted the wrong way signs that woman had to pass before she was in a terrible accident.
That's true.
She passed 14 wrong way signs. I don't think we can affect this with signs. I wish we could. I wish it were that easy. I think we live in a world where people don't pay attention. I think a lot of it are those marvelous devices that we walk around with in our hands. And as long as those tell us we're going the right way, we think we're going the right way. So I think there is a lot of that, which is sad that they don't differentiate that they're on the wrong side of the road. I would encourage people to stay in the right-hand lane until there is a better answer. Because I think, and I've seen it, it sent chills down my spine to see it on the other side of the road in the dark one night, blasting my horn and just helpless. So please know that it has our attention. Human behavior is very difficult to affect. And I thought in just the other day of a sign that we could and maybe should put up. I know we've talked about putting up signs to greet people when they come into Rappahannock County. And I think maybe they should say, put down your phone and please look around and drive like you have some sense. You're in the country now. Because it is different. And I don't mean to sound pejorative or unkind, but it is a completely different surrounding than many of the tourists that come out here are used to. And it's not an easy answer.
Thank you. I'm going to get us back to public comment. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Sally Haynes, Piedmont District. I encountered one of those one-way drivers coming out of Normandy. Very surprising. I'm here today to make a comment on the amendment to Chapter 30 to set the 3-minute limit on public comment. I commend the board for trying to anticipate and prevent problems. At the same time, at public hearings, we do hear board members say, I wish we had heard these comments earlier instead of later in the process. So this amendment, to an extent, signals the opposite. The areas where I'd like to see some action and attention are providing notice and ensuring transparency. I think those are existing problems, not just anticipatory. If you go forward with the amendment, please note that due to reorganizing the material in 30-3, what's left of A probably should be moved to 30-5 because it refers to the material above which has been removed. And in 30-5C2, there's an exception for an applicant to be able to answer a question of a board member. It seems like it would be convenient for a citizen to also be able to answer a question if the board member had a question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Excuse me.
Ron Macklem, Jackson District. I just have sort of questions and comments on what happened last month with your meetings, in that you had your January 1st meeting And at the end of that, it was a little confusing watching it on the tape or whatever, but you continued it to the 25th. And so it was a continued meeting. And on the 25th, myself, Karen Hunt showed up for that. I showed up for it. Anita showed up for it. I had taken time out of the day to prepare comments, and Karen had done the same thing. And the meeting had been canceled at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I've got several questions on that. Number one is that it was a reconvened meeting. So actually the meeting was already taking place, and I don't understand how you can cancel that. And because of that cancellation, that meeting is still in session. It was never adjourned. So I don't know how you're going to handle that in the minutes. But also another question I have is that in the process of canceling the meeting, from what the report that I read on it, basically 3 supervisors communicated in a short period of time and decided, voted, whatever, to cancel the meeting. And that's not supposed to happen. So we gotta keep our meetings going according to Robert's Rules of Order. And also on the canceled meeting, it stated that all the items on the agenda would be at this meeting, yet one of them was left off, which was about the Army request for a center here or whatever, and that's not on today's agenda. And actually, that's what Karen was going to speak about at the 25th meeting. So we've got to do a little bit better job and keep the public in mind, particularly on canceling it. And 4 hours out, no, that's too late. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Not seeing any hands in the courtroom. I'm going to go to Zoom. Is there anyone on Zoom wishing to speak during public comment? Please raise your Zoom hand. All right. Not seeing anyone on Zoom wishing to speak, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. And we will go into H1, which is school zone speed camera enforcement. Sheriff.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you this afternoon. As many of you know, the speed cameras in the school zones represent a significant security enhancement for our most vulnerable citizens, which are our kids. Our small agency can only monitor the areas for a limited duration. Implementing speed enforcement cameras in the school zones presents a valuable chance to decelerate traffic and relieve my patrol deputies from the task of enforcing school speed zones. This is not a decision we take lightly. A project of this scale requires collaboration to be effective. Joining us today is Mr. Randy Campbell from Blue Line Solutions that will answer any questions that you may have. If approved, my agency will assume full responsibility for the cameras and the associated fees. We will review the footage and handle all court proceedings should an offender fail to respond to the summons. Recent statistics indicate that annually about 25,000 children are injured in school zones per year, and another 100 are fatally injured in the area, in school zones also. Blue Line Solutions has conducted a speed study in our school zones, and the data from this study is accessible, I believe, on board docs. Blue Line Solutions will aid us in initiating an educational and awareness campaign to inform the public about the cameras and the penalties for speeding through our school zones. The public will also be notified about the enforcement times. Enforcement will extend to the school events where there have been several instances of my deputies almost being hit. In conjunction with the educational campaign, Blue Line Solutions will enhance our school zones with the installation of the modern signage and lighting, which I've spoken with Dr. Grimsley about. Ensuring safety is my primary objective, aimed at safeguarding students and citizens participating in school events and attending school. My sole aim is to acquire the necessary equipment to decrease the speed in our school zones, preventing us from becoming a statistic with a student, school attendee, or a deputy directing traffic. The safety of the school is my primary concern. My goal today is to ask you for approval for the camera installation, and also request that the revenue is placed in its own revenue line item that I have access to, and these funds will enable us to support our schools and community projects without burdening the taxpayers. And if you have any questions, Mr. Campbell is here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you, Sheriff. Good afternoon. My name is Randy Campbell. I'm a retired sergeant with the Virginia State Police, and I currently serve in a role as a regional safety advisor with Blue Line Solutions, a traffic safety technology group out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. I cover the state of Virginia. Sheriff Compton came in and asked me last December to come up and do speed studies. And one of the things, before we kind of get out into the training pool on that I want to preface with you is my comments that I'm going to give to you today are founded upon my experience as a trooper and a sergeant with the state police. You talked about human behavior a while ago. That factors into all of this stuff, traffic safety, enforcement, all of these things collaboratively. So when I came up in December, I conducted speed studies for you guys at your high school, your elementary school, and with your permission, may I share the data? So what we do, data drives everything I think that's probably used quite a bit, but data drives everything we do. Because what we want to do with our organization is it's not revenue driven. We want to decrease the number of speed violations in your school zones. We do that through very heavy public information and education campaigns that is ongoing. It's not a one-time check the box. So what we aim for is a 90% decrease from the preliminary data, like I'm going to share with you, over a 3-month, 6-month, and a continual process. So when I came up, we come into a jurisdiction and we check the speeds and capture the volume of traffic that's coming through your school zones between the times of school. And I just noticed you have that there, so thank you for that Jedi technology. So for 5 days back in December, we'll start with Rappahannock High School. I'm not sure if that's what you have up, but a 5-day total vehicle count through the high school, you had 15,611 vehicles that came through. Now, between the hours of 7:45 a.m. and 3:30 p.m., you had 6,675 vehicles that were exceeding the posted speed of, if it was at the school zone limit of 35 miles per hour. Now, in Virginia, the Code of Virginia specifically, it recognizes that the beacon lights have to be flashing for it to be an active school zone. So what we do is we pare those numbers down, and if you look during the times from 7:45 to 8:20, 2:45 to 3:30 p.m., at the high school you had 514 violations that were traveling at 10 miles per hour or higher over the posted speed limit of 35. And I will tell you also, many of those speeds are 20 miles an hour or greater. We can flip over to the elementary school, and because they're in very close proximity to each other, very similar numbers, over 6,500 violations coming through during the school hours, with 847 drivers. I like to personalize this because there's a human being driving these vehicles that were traveling in excess of 10 miles per hour or greater over the posted speed of 35. And there's one caveat that I want to share with everyone. This is the only statute in the code that the General Assembly is gracious enough. They give the drivers, when they come through these active school zones, a 9-mile-per-hour tolerance. You know, in certain parts of the state, there's like a hue and cry against these things, but at the end of the day, when a driver comes through a school zone, it's his or her responsibility to pay attention and obey, and then you're getting 9 miles per hour, because that's where our 10-mile-per-hour threshold starts. So as a result of the data that the sheriff and I looked over, we wanted to move forward. I don't want to be redundant. I know that you guys have some information on this program, so I'll hit pause, And whatever questions you guys, I will definitely answer and entertain.
Yeah, I have a question, just to make sure I understand the data. So the top line, the 17,000 total is during school hours generally.
Just generally coming through.
And then the subset of that total is when the lights are flashing and schools letting in, or in and out, right? When
Correct.
students are arriving and when they're leaving.
Yep.
Okay. My only other question really is just plain devil's advocate and recognizing your company is
Yes.
Tennessee based. I assume that you're very active in rural communities in Tennessee, and it sounds like you're probably very active in rural communities and maybe suburban communities in both Tennessee and Virginia. What, if you were to identify the top 2 or 3 pushbacks from citizens about this, just so we can anticipate where people are going to give us a hard time about implementing this technology, setting aside the obvious public safety problem that it would be solving?
First of all, thank you for asking that, because again, there's a lot of minutia, like people minutia, that you have to take into consideration. Yeah. The sheriff and I have talked about that, and we're currently in partnership with the town of Front Royal, and I'll use them as like Exhibit A. So there was a local pushback from the citizenry there in Warren County, the town of Front Royal. We don't want this. One of the big things, well, let me preface this from a professional perspective. All of the pushback that we see around the state and the other states that we operate in, I like to refer to that as emotion-driven. It's emotion-driven. It's not built upon facts or logic or anything like that. Probably the biggest thing that I would recommend, and the sheriff and I have talked about this, your biggest asset and resource, leadership in Rappahannock County, is the transparency of, this is what's coming to Rappahannock County based on this data. And quite frankly, if anybody argues against this data, it's a mute argument. I mean, you can't, there's no articulation of how, like, we don't want it because, well, why not? Because we have issues. So the marketing, the public information, the education, everyone in this community, the county, the surrounding counties, they will be without excuse of not knowing that this is being implemented. And I know that Connie touched on this, but long before the first summons is ever issued, we have 30 days of public information and education. We create all these cool Jedi marketing graphics for social media, boom, boom, boom. Then we have a 30-day warning period. And I call that a conditioning, acclimating people. They will get a warning summons in the mail showing their vehicle, their license plate, the time, all of these things are speed. And then we'll implement the live enforcement. Does that give you a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, what is a typical, what's the basis for setting it, well, recognizing that the data support implementing this technology? I assume that was the case in Front Royal too.
It was.
So is this sort of does it come down to the typical, I don't like government taking photos of me?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's a violation of my constitutional. It's all of these things.
Okay.
Again, I will tell you to kind of cap that off. I know that the sheriff is in touch with Front Royal leadership and George Sonnet. The community has embraced it now that they see it's not a cash cow. And I'll speak very boldly from my experience with the state police and what I see around the state. There are other vendors that they're not worried about a 90% decrease. They want to implement a contract to cash as fast as possible and start making money. And that bothers me greatly because that hurts the legitimate mission.
Right.
Yeah, so I'll stop. So.
Okay. Yeah, George is Mr. Sana, who's the town attorney in Front Royal, is one of my constituents. So
I think
I can talk to him directly.
Love George. Please reach out to him.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I had heard a privacy concern from a citizen.
Sure.
About this sort of system, but it's my understanding from the way the sheriff described it to me is that this is only monitoring for speeding when the lights are flashing. Is that correct?
That's correct. The only time that data is collected or captured is if someone is in violation of state law. Okay. And to take that a step further, it's only the rear of their vehicle and the license plate.
Okay, thank you.
If I understand correctly, you can turn on the cameras for special events like prom or something like that as well.
It is. The Code of Virginia, the way it's written, It's very open-ended for localities, in that if you have Friday night football, there's other places around the state that they're operating this. You may have a basketball tournament, because during basketball season, there's always something going on. You name it, and as long as children, and this is code language, are going to, coming from, or present at the school, then you can have an active school zone.
And the lights will flash and the cameras will activate.
That is correct, yes.
Did that answer your question? Dr. Grimsley's asking to be
Sure.
recognized.
Yes, ma'am, go for it.
To do with the schools, so one of the questions I can anticipate,
Mhm.
because they're the ones that flip the switch on those lights.
Mhm.
So if I have a 2-hour delay and the
Mhm.
timer on the lights is still going,
Yes.
this is what I've asked the sheriff too, but I think it will clarify, because I bet you will get that question. Okay, someone's not there to hit the button,
Sure.
the lights are going off,
That's
someone
right.
went through knowing school's not in session.
Right.
So what's the buffer? It's not an automatic.
Yeah, so once we get this program up and running, we place a high value on close communication with our stakeholders in the jurisdiction. So we will have a copy of your school calendar, all the hard dates, holidays, you name it, teacher work days. But I know you get snow up here sometimes, or ice. We would be contacted by someone, probably with the sheriff's office. And we have a 24-hour buffer period before we process any summons. Just for that simple reason right there. And the other thing is, I'll give you an example, maybe, well, you both of your schools are together, but I won't go down that track. My point is, even if those summons were processed, once we got information that they've been issued, they are immediately voided. Does that answer your question? Yes, ma'am.
I have two, one's a question and one's a comment. First, the data was in December, the first week in December, correct? I just want to point out that that is when traffic is probably slowing
Of course, yeah.
through our county. I mean, we so those numbers, that snapshot was taken during probably a very lower travel period. And I was still,
Yeah.
shocked and bothered by those numbers. So if you think about those numbers in October or peak
Yes, the
leaf
fall,
season.
that's right.
And my baby is on that road.
Yeah.
The second thing, I want to understand cost.
Yes.
So if you could just go over that a little bit for the benefit, so that everyone is perfectly clear about how much
Sure.
this would cost.
There is zero cost to Rappahannock County. Now, in the contract, if that was what you were touching on, there are 2 programs that a jurisdiction can choose to go with, and Rappahannock County is going with the zero-cost program. So at no time, and this will be part of the contractual language, at no time will Rappahannock County ever be billed or receive an invoice from Blue Line Solutions for anything.
And there's some sort of relationship with county. Can you explain what we're doing? There's some
That's a
sort.
contractual, so while there's no cost, it is a fee for service. The fees are just coming out of the civil penalties.
The
And
non-compliant.
so your procurement rules apply. And so you just can't hand a contract to Mr. Campbell's business. But other counties have competed these services. And Blue Line Solutions has told us they have a contract with county.
Mhm.
And with county, when they competed their project, they included language that says other counties could purchase off of that contract cooperatively.
Mhm.
Now, we haven't seen the contract yet, which I'm sure we will. And so before, as a purchasing agent, I can say, yes, we'll just need to dot those i's. But that allows you to do this without purchasing RFP.
Correct,
or
that's
whatever.
right.
They already did it in Wythe County to make sure it's a good bang for the buck.
And we have 20 other jurisdictions in the state. All of them, the rider contract from with, that makes the entire purchasing agreement so much simpler than going out to RFP. Yep.
Any other questions, comments?
I guess,
Get your mic.
So I think Art's reviewed it, I'm not sure, the agreement, I don't know.
Well, I'm waiting on the Wythe County.
Okay, and so I would just ask if there's action that it's contingent on review and approval by the county attorney and conformance with our purchasing requirements.
yeah, I guess the only comment I would have is more for the sheriff. And I know Chair Donahue and I talked about this briefly, and And I appreciate the idea of isolating the revenue generated from this technology so you can track it. And I think it's a detail maybe we all can work out as part of the overall county budget and the sheriff's department budget in particular, to make sure that that's, from an accounting perspective, the best way to manage that revenue. But I appreciate the thought that you put into how you manage that revenue and what it could be used for. I think that makes sense on its face, but I think we should, once we, not to put the cart before the horse, but when we get to the point that that revenue is coming in, that we've all thought through exactly how it'll be tracked and managed, just in part for public transparency. Yeah, so it's really just more a comment than any question.
So at this point, to me, it sounds like everybody believes this is a good idea. Don't let me speak for you. But there's some I's to dot and T's to cross.
The recommended action contemplates that, it's a two-step thing. I assume that we're talking about more than $25,000 before the dust settles on this, which is why the board would need to make an award to Blue Line Solutions. And then if you're inclined to move forward, then you would move to authorize Sheriff Compton. And the way it's set up right now is the Sheriff Compton would be the signer of this agreement. Art would have to tell you whether that's legal or not, I don't know. The code is really interesting because it says law enforcement agencies can contract with. So that's not normally how we do things. So at any rate, it says move to authorize Sheriff Compton to execute the agreement after review and approval as the legal form by the county attorney and confirmation by the purchasing agent that the cooperative purchasing requirements have been met. I have every reason to believe that the purchasing side will be easy.
Okay. I'll put forward a motion that we move to award the presented described goods and services related to photo speed enforcement in the elementary and high school crossing zones to Blue Line Solutions LLC as recommended by the sheriff, and also move to authorize the Sheriff Compton, to execute the agreement after review and approval as to legal form by the county attorney, and also confirmation by the county's purchasing agent that cooperative purchasing requirements have been met.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I just wanted to say that I support the sheriff's ability to control this funding source. And I thank her for her initiative in bringing this program forward. I think it's really important. And I know how very hard our sheriff works to be a diligent administrator of public funds. And I think that we would do well to let her oversee this funding source.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, moving into the Public Safety Committee recommendations, to be followed by Life Pack 35 funding.
Do you want to carry this item from the Public Safety Committee?
Sure.
You want me to read it?
No, that's fine. So you just want to, are we going to do sort of the broad discussion?
Well, the recommendations that came out of the last
Yeah.
Public Safety
Okay.
Committee meeting.
All right, yep. So at our last Public Safety Committee meeting, following a lot of discussion with people in the community about what our individual volunteer companies might need in terms of support from the county, and then distilling sort of a longer list of areas where individual volunteer fire and rescue companies had indicated potential need. I put forward to the Public Safety Committee 5 recommendations where perhaps the county could, what is that?
That's the metal detector downstairs.
Oh, okay. I put forward 5 recommendations as a starting point for the Public Safety Committee to consider as tangible ways that county government could support our individual volunteer fire and rescue companies. And the goal there really is, number one, to take as much administrative pressure off of our volunteers, and then number two, make sure that the $1.5 million in taxpayer funds that are currently flowing into our volunteer fire and rescue companies in the form of fire levy-based reimbursements for operating expenses are being optimized to the maximum extent possible. And then also finally recognizing that the way pharmaceuticals are managed and requirements for EMTs, which Dr. Hill mentioned earlier, that recognizing that pressure on our volunteers and requirements for our volunteers are increasing, where can we as a county government step in, but also while respecting the individual identity and corporate formation of each of our individual companies. So through all of that, I distilled a long list of possible ways we might be able to provide assistance and put forward 5 initiatives, all of which were described as completely voluntary. They're offers for companies that can demonstrate a financial or operational need. The first one is the county providing direct financial support for the acquisition of life packs, which are a very capital intensive piece of equipment that are key to the operation of our the EMS side of our companies. Number two, to the extent that staffing of volunteers during certain times of the day, certain days during the week might be difficult, expanding our paid paramedics in the county system so that we have more paid paramedics available to fill staffing gaps at our individual companies if called upon to do so. And then, as I mentioned at the outset, recognizing that FDA and DEA regulations are changing very soon, I believe later this year, in offering to companies who would want this assistance a centralized management of pharmaceuticals for the companies, so that administrative reporting burden and management is taken off of the shoulders of our volunteer companies to the extent they want such support. And the fourth, and which I mentioned earlier in the back and forth with Dr. Hill, possible replication if companies thought that it would be a good model, the replication of the rapid response vehicle model, where EMTs who are on duty would be able to respond directly to EMS calls from their homes, as opposed to engaging in the additional time needed to go to the station, then respond. And then the fifth and final initiative was recognizing the importance of scheduling and understanding who is available and when, both in terms of the paid side of our county system, which is currently ALS 1400 plus paramedics paid both at Chester Gap and Sperryville, really optimizing everyone in the system, including volunteers, make sure that everyone's on the same page from a scheduling perspective. And to that end, a proposal that we do a better job with centralized scheduling, so we know all of our personnel assets that are out there at any given time, and really taking advantage of who's available and when, and making sure that we're not left with staffing gaps that otherwise might not exist absent good, transparent, centralized scheduling. So these were the proposals, again, a distilled number of proposals that came out of a broader list of possible areas where we could assist volunteer fire and rescue companies. And the Public Safety Committee approved these in the form of a recommendation of the Board of Supervisors by a vote of 7-0. And so that's where we stand now. And I think Mr. Stevens might be best equipped to talk about what response so far he's received from the volunteer companies. I should say that Mr. Stevens invited me to join him for the last meeting of the chiefs. And so I reiterated the details of these 5 initiatives and also reiterated the very important point that, number one, this is not intended in any way as county intervention in our individual volunteer fire and rescue companies. It truly is, these are voluntary offers of assistance and will be provided only to those companies who express an interest in taking advantage of these offers. And there might be others that we discuss here or at the Public Safety Committee that we bring forward in the future. But I thought this might be a good starting point to say to our volunteer fire and rescue companies, this is a system. This is a system that we need to optimize to the maximum extent possible. And the county and county taxpayers are already spending a significant amount of money to the tune of $1.5 million for the system to operate well. And to the extent that we need to spend a little bit more money to make the system work even better as a whole, then we should do that. And that's really the spirit of this. Thank you.
Come on up.
Hi, Madam Chair, ladies, and this old gentleman left to the board today. Thank you for giving me a few moments of your time. After our last chiefs meeting, I did go back and did some follow-up with several chiefs, and I did go to our last association meeting and spoke. Two of the big topics coming fast, whether we're ready or not, is November 27th. There's been changes in the Board of Pharmacy regarding how we handle medications and most notably narcotics. And it came down as a requirement from the FDA involving track and trace. We need, drug manufacturers must be able to track a drug once it leaves their facility to when it either goes into a patient's arm or into a trash can. So it wasn't a DEA change, it wasn't a Board of Pharmacy change, but it has forced everyone's hand. This had a 10-year implementation date. We worked on this or grappled with this for several years. In my former job, we knew this was coming. With COVID, put it back, but the reality is November 27th is the drop dead date that we're going to have to comply with this. The regional councils for the Commonwealth of Virginia, the regional EMS councils are kind of taking lead on this. We've gotten some support out of that, but some of the information is slow. We've partnered with several other surrounding jurisdictions to see what their plan is moving forward. And I've been polling, along with the EMS Council, what everyone's companies in this county's intent is to do so. So following Mr. Whitson's recommendation or his speech at the Chiefs meeting, I did express that, I think Todd Summers is here, the chief of the Sperryville Rescue Squad, and Flint Hill is currently under our EMS license as well. Their organizations would fall under us for drugs. We're talking about a cooperative agreement with them that would meet the requirements set forth by the Virginia Office of EMS to move forward. This program won't allow you to share drugs or pharmaceuticals from company to company unless you're all part of the same EMS agency. So we've identified a path where they can keep as much autonomy as possible and remain independent as an organization and a visible entity in their community and still fall under us for operational needs, which would allow us to share medications. A lot of these medications have to be purchased in bulk. As an example, fentanyl, which we use for pain management, we have to buy it in a 24-pack. None of our three agencies alone would use that within its expiration dates when it would have to be replaced ultimately. So the fact that we'd be staffing three ambulances in an EMS response vehicle with that I think we could probably get our money's worth. And there are a lot of other equipment. We're starting to expand our discussion even more to include some of the more costly EMS supply items that you just simply can't buy individual. In healthcare, and the pandemic certainly exacerbated this, is several of the things we use now have expiration dates and they become disposable. Tools that we use for advanced airway practice, we used to have to come back and autoclave them. Now they're just simply disposable and they're thrown away, but we have to replace them. Again, the only way to economically do that is with bulk purchase. So I do think it's a wise move to strategically bundle some of those resources together for all the organizations. The Chester Gap, I think their intent is to probably move under the Warren County solution. They will operate independently, but under the Warren solution, which, given their call volume and where they run, makes perfect sense to me. I think the initial signals I've gotten from the Washington and Amosville organizations that they're probably going to work independently and independently of themselves, but I haven't gotten a final on that. Everyone still has there's still some questions to be raised. And I have not gotten a final, which is out of Castleton with their BLS company. They won't have the heavy hit of having to keep the DEA licensing requirements, but they still would have to have a controlled substance registration done through the local board of pharmacy. But the medications are fairly benign and easy to obtain. Most of them are over the counter at the BLS level. Again, it's still an ongoing discussion. I expressed our willingness to help and support in any way we can. When Todd Summers and I have been planning this out and how we build it, one of the big focuses is it needs to be expandable. If we start to expand this program, we need to be able to, if other companies down the road come under our fold, we need to have them be able to build on that and what we have in place. So I did tell them the equipment that we plan to use for narcotic storage on the ambulances, so if any of them are teetering on what type of things to buy, it would be beneficial as much as we can to all have the same equipment. Any questions on the pharmacy issues? There was a glimmer of hope. The Virginia Board of Pharmacy had approved some emergency amendments, which would allow companies that aren't under the same health agency to share some medications, but that does not apply to any Schedule 1 through 5 medication. So any of those, you're still going to have to meet the DEA regulation independently. If you meet the DEA regulation, the Board of Pharmacy regulation is a much lower standard, so you've automatically met that. So while it was, like I said, a glimmer of hope where it could possibly apply some common sense to this, it was short-lived.
I think I understand a paramedic has to be a station that's going to do it themselves. A paramedic has to manage it all, or can you clarify that?
You have to have a responsible party, and the responsible party has to be a person that possesses a license to use all the drugs that are contained within your formulary. So typically, yes, you'd have to have a paramedic. Now to stipulate, that person doesn't have to be the one that literally touches and moves the drug around. You could actually hire a logistics person. You could have another EMS certified person, but that paramedic will be the one held responsible if anything is missing or abused.
The other question I have with the barn, or whatever we're calling it, that's being built, I think that's where you're thinking that eventually the narcotics will be kept and locked up there.
Yeah, so the preliminary discussion, we were talking about that building. We saw this coming down the road about 6 months ago, and we, in talking with Mr. Curry, we designed the building that it would have an outside door that somebody could come in, and that room could go directly into a supply area that could house possibly a gear washing machine. So if firefighters have gear that's been contaminated, they can come in and wash it in a large extractor and dryer. And secondly, access to a medication closet. What a lot of the organizations are doing is using a vending machine for the distribution of drugs. So if an individual company ran a call, afterwards they could drive by. If it's something they were low on, they need to refill, they could come in. They have to go through a PIN number, a fingerprint ID, whatever. So we know what's dispensed, who took it, and what unit it went to. I think from our perspective, the narcotics are going to be treated much like they are now. They're going to be in a separate box. Individual providers wouldn't have access to the individual narcotic drugs. They would have to take it in a pack, in a small pack. But yeah, the intent is to one day move there. Because this clock is ticking and it takes 90 days to apply, and we're only about 120 days out from the drop dead implementation date, Chief Summers has completed the DEA requirements and the Board of Pharmacy requirements for their facility, and it's been inspected, and we have been talking to some vendors and pricing out both the software to manage this and what narcotics or security items we'll need to put on ambulances to ensure our compliance.
So this is there are savings that Mr. Stevens has noted for our system collective use. This overall is a shift of cost from the hospitals to the locality.
Right.
The hospitals used to purchase, track, dole out all of the drugs, and that process going away, and now we will be providing those. So the universe of drugs should still be the same, or maybe lower. But who pays for them and how they come and go and who's responsible for them is changing.
I reached out to CMS services. I didn't talk to our billing company direct, but we've had these conversations in the past. Those supplies that we use on an ambulance and any medications are all rolled into that cost currently. So that, you know, there is no, we can't charge separately for the drugs that we use now. We can't charge separately for a cervical collar if we put it on a trauma patient. It's all put in or placed into your billing plan to begin with. And that's why the difference between an ALS1 call or an ALS2 call would be the complexity of the call, but it's also you use more supplies and more equipment, more disposable equipment. But there's no, that's not going to be a source to help fill this hole.
Will we also not be able to get the cervical collar from the hospital? Will we have to?
As of now, I think they anticipate to continue that one-for-one
Okay.
exchange relationship. That's a question that's going around now, and no one's told me in writing that they are or are not.
Probably less liability with the collars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And costs are much less. I think that, you know, we enjoyed a great relationship with all the hospitals that serve us in terms of exchanging drugs. But, you know, for the last 4 years out here, if you used a narcotic and you transported a patient to Winchester, you still had to return to Fauquier Hospital to exchange your narcotics. So this will allow you to do it in-house. Again, there are a few organizations in Virginia that have already implemented this. Orange County has done it. Nottoway has been a really good lead and have shared a lot of their wisdom and trials and errors. So at least we're not going in uncharted territory. It's not going to be that difficult once we start. It's just getting it up and running.
So that's on the pharmaceutical side of the 5
Yes.
proposals. So if we could, let's just go through them. So what reaction have you received regarding the need for more paid, a larger pool of paid paramedics? There you go. Good news.
Sorry.
Yeah, a larger pool of paid paramedics to plug staffing gaps.
Outside of talking to Chief Summers, who, you know, they are struggling with ALS coverage within their organization, and in fact we're swapping some days out. They're staying within the confines of the agreement, where, you know, the board is responsible for this many hours or this many dollars, but just because of staff availability and availability on their side, some of those days are flexing. No one else has signaled that they have any intent or any interest in that.
I know this is not a surprise to you all, but I would once again ask for response times and numbers and mapping. If there are deficiencies that people aren't meeting the response time requirements, that is something that we urgently need to know. But I don't believe that's currently happening. Is that happening, that response times aren't being met?
I know we're meeting our local standards for response times. You are correct. I think there's been a lot of, we are meeting it, but with a great deal of strain. There are a lot of, Pareto's principle is alive and well. 80% of our workload is probably done by 20% of our rosters. And that is not unlike any other organizations, you know, volunteer typical organizations. There are some people that are carrying an incredible load here. And I'm thankful to have them. You know, we've been averaging about 16 hours of absenteeism in the 1400 scheduling because of service gaps.
Yeah, I get the update.
Yep, and this last month alone, it's risen quite a bit.
Oh, sure.
And I'm thankful that we've got a really good cadre with volunteers. I try to communicate a few days in advance of anticipated vacancies, and they've been able to flip around their schedule. But please know there are a few people in this system that are very giving of their time to help maintain this, and that's what makes going into the scheduling brings me even more value to that. But so in an informal way, we are making great progress there, and often we're able to back up where somebody's schedule fills up or frees up, and they're able to take on those shifts. But this has been a rough few weeks here.
Yeah, I know. Yesterday I had great pause because I think you all had no staffing yesterday. And it was free entry day in the park.
Oh, yesterday we were up.
Oh, you were up? Was it Saturday?
Yep.
You were?
Friday at 7 p.m., which wound up, I was working Friday day, and I didn't get off till 9 because of the late fire call in Castleton area. But from 9 p.m. till 7 in the morning, we were unstaffed. Yeah. Originally, we anticipated being unstaffed on Sunday.
Okay, good.
And then on Friday afternoon, we had an employee, so I've made some moves on my personal life, and I'm able to staff it.
I'm so glad to hear someone was on yesterday, although I didn't hear any calls on the mountain. Those free entry days at the park tend to bring out everybody that maybe normally wouldn't come. So.
please know I'm extremely proud of the folks that work with us for what they do. These gaps in staffing aren't really based on, in my opinion, they aren't based on somebody's unwillingness or they just can't do it. Most of them want to, but 80% of our providers at the 1400, we're their secondary employer.
Right.
And one of the things that's plaguing fire and rescue systems across the nation, and especially in Northern Virginia region, is staffing shortages. And they're getting called back or they're getting held over, which creates a shortfall here. So some of them have been more reluctant to sign up for days that they know it's the day they're getting off because their chances of being held are much greater. So with that coming up, I try to communicate that so we can all work together to help solve those needs with volunteer counterparts. But the reality is often they're not held and they're able to come staff. But I don't want to sound like the kid saying the sky is falling, but I'm trying to, my communication with the chiefs has really been, my goal has been to be open and honest and give them as much notice as possible about potential vacancies. Quite often they do get filled ultimately, but I want to give them some notice because it does take some planning on their part to help fill those gaps.
What is the best way, do you think, to monitor and measure this issue?
I think it involves more than just simply meeting a response time and standard, and it probably comes down to are we arriving within the time limit, but are we arriving with an appropriately staffed or an appropriately staffed level of service that the patient needs? Yeah. I think capitalizing on our BLS protocols currently are probably one of the best in the state. They're giving an EMT the full gamut of what the state allows them to do to help treat patients. That coupled with the tiered response of an initial provider shows up, they start to call ALS 1400 people can come if there's not an ALS unit coming or an ambulance coming. And together we all work together in a truck. So ultimately our goal is to get ALS care to the people that need it. That's probably maybe where the rub is. Also, this is, I've looked at the county mapping, like a pin map of where the calls occur here, and usually it's very clear and evident what your staffing pattern should be. It's a real challenge here because of the sparse population. We really don't have population centers. A citizen that lives at the edge of Slate Mills with an adjoining county pays the same taxes and should have the same level of service as someone who's fortunate enough to live next door to a firehouse in one of our enclaves. And that's a challenge because it's geography. We can fight a lot of things, but we can't fight geography. So
Can't fight Father Time either. So
no,
it's tough.
I don't know what happened yesterday, but I know Chester Gap came down and covered for one while one was doing something else.
Yeah, I think everything was depleted. I think 1 and 1400 were both on a transport, and I asked them to come down and move more centrally, so they're available to support the system.
Where did they go?
I think they went to one.
I think they went to Washington.
Oh, I saw that. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Which is, we expressed that we didn't really like it when 9 did that and parked in Front Royal, so. I imagine
it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander.
Because they're no longer central to their response district.
Well, we have at least a 40% right to dictate where they go.
Yeah.
So out of every 10 times, we get to do it 4 times at least.
That's right.
Well, they agreed to stop doing it.
Well, like I said, we're trying to look out for the system and the citizenry, the best, if we can allocate our resources centrally, and that's where communication really becomes key. So we know what the staffing levels are different at different stations each day.
So that's a natural segue into the question about centralized scheduling.
So we have been experimenting. We use a program called Sling. The nice thing about that from the 1400 perspective, it does offer some HR. It does our payroll for processing hours and pay. Chief Summers is using a different program. They've been using it very successfully as well. We're certainly not locked in. We looked at both, evaluated, but that did not offer any type of payroll functions. So we've added 2 of their members and it started putting days in as a different stations to see how that would work, to add some of their people in and see if it's something that is expandable. So something we're currently using. It looks at names and not units. I guess from our perspective, what we want is a system to know that we don't necessarily care that it's it's Jim Jones and Joe Robertson staffing the medic unit. We just need to know that the medic unit is up or a basic unit is up.
Yeah.
So it's not perfected yet. We're still playing around with it, and we're open to trying to find some solution.
Okay. And do you feel like most of the companies in the county are amenable to doing whatever they have to do to provide information that makes that platform meaningful and informative?
By most, it being the majority, yes, I do.
Okay.
I just don't want to get everyone involved until we have a solution that we all feel good about. But we are working on it.
Okay. And then I guess that leads us to rapid response vehicles. I know Company 4, we talked about that earlier. Company 7's used it. I guess Castleton was the obvious. Maybe next.
Castleton has an EMS license. They have been taking one home. I've seen them come out on calls where they've come to meet us. I know that because the Company 4 is under our license, we were involved in the licensing of getting their utility raised up to be an EMS response vehicle. So yeah, I think we're making headway. From a staffing perspective, not all the stations are probably well equipped to receive volunteers or anyone on a 24-hour basis. So until improvements can be made and they become a little more livable, we're based on a home response at the majority of our areas, and it is what it is. But at least somebody coming out, being able to meet answer the call in a vehicle that has emergency lights and sirens and a radio, it makes it a lot more palatable for the rest of the system to know that somebody's coming and that they're responding. For an ambulance to go out driver only, then they're going to meet somebody, and together they're going to come together and form a call. From my perspective, it's a little more problematic when people are just relying on, hey, so-and-so's on my way here or something. Having radios, I think, go a long way in that. If somebody hits a deer or something else, or they're not able to mark up, but that needs to also, I think, be coupled with staffing so they're available, because if they don't answer, then why don't we look and see what happened? They may have had a radio problem. They may have had some other type of vehicle problem. It'll bring, the goal is to probably bring more accountability, so we know what's out there. There's a lot of resources here, and I think there's just times that we need to share them to get the job done.
Okay, and then I guess the last one was life packs, and I think appropriately in our agenda, there's a suggestion that we implement some system going to this sort of needs-based request idea where companies would say to the county in writing financial and practical need for this kind of support, which is not insignificant. So I guess for today, I think it'd be good to know what response you've received from the companies regarding county support for life pack acquisition.
If I could have the latitude just to give a few minutes on the history of what brought us to where we are today, because it's kind of several months ago, I was meeting with our local rep because we're talking about purchasing AEDs. It's the same company that sells AEDs. And he mentioned that they were getting ready to get their FDA approval to release the LifePak 35s, which is a device that I've been following really closely, but it was, information was secretive at the time. I asked them if they were going to do any special introductory prices, which would be what they've done with the last 2 times that they've rolled out new devices. The LifePak 15 that we currently use is 17. The device is 17 years old. The technology is 17 years old. There have been upgrades and there have been revisions over the years, but at its heart, it's a 17-year-old unit. So I was interested to see the new LifePak 35, which at that point was still unnamed. He went back and said introductory pricing, they would offer it at their current LifePak 15 price. And that would be good until they actually announced the FDA approval and the release of them. So I asked him I secured for our maximum, thinking, well, if the most we have or whatever need are 10, and he wrote me a quote for that, knowing that we could downgrade that down the road if that's what we needed to do. So while I was looking at that from our agency's perspective, I thought the inclusion of introductory pricing was a pretty phenomenal rebate at the time, was worth sharing with everyone else and see if anyone else wanted to join the county. Initially, several companies were very interested in coming on board. The LifePak 15 is rated for an 8-year service life. I think 5 of the 10 in our system are at 8 years. They no longer provide service contracts annually. They do their inspections and make sure they're workable, but if there's anything that's broken, it becomes a responsible party or responsible for the owner to pay for the service. They automatically take them off at the extension of their 8 years. Not to say that they won't continue to work for possibly several more years. It's just, if something meets its service life is based on, it's probably going to start to cost you more and more money to maintain it. The same thing we all experience probably when we're thinking about trading in our car. Going back and meeting, the initial concept was if there's a great deal of financial savings in just making a group purchase. Not only in that, and then paying advance of the 8-year service contract. If you pay it up front, you save about $400 a year over an 8-year contract. So I started talking to some of the companies that were interested in doing this together, and a few had financial constraints that they just couldn't commit those many dollars at one time. So then the conversation went to meeting with Mr. Curry to see the possibility of could it be feasible if the county could make the group purchase, and then for the service piece, which is typically funded through the Public Safety Committee, we could get reimbursed, or fire levy, I'm sorry, that could get reimbursed over the next few years. And the companies themselves for the individual purchase could start to pay back those funds over. We floated a 2-year or 3-year option to see what everyone was interested or what they could financially felt that they could take on. And that was our initial, what we were thinking of getting together for the last board meeting. And then one of the companies came back and said, as much as we need this piece of equipment, we just can't financially make the decision. We can't make this at this point. We're just we're too financially be too much of a strain in the organization. We have a new ambulance that we need to replace, et cetera. One of the other companies that wanted to buy 2 said, well, we could easily buy 1, but we can't, same thing. We've got an ambulance on order, and to throw another $50,000 at that, I think it would be better to wait. Companies like that, it's challenging to replace a single unit when you have to. Your staff, for training, they have to have 2 different units, be familiar with 2 different units. So that's what brought us to, I guess, the discussion at Public Safety. We said, well, is there some ability for the county to just make this purchase if they can demonstrate a financial need? So out of the organizations I have pulled, without going through them all individually, one organization from your board documents has withdrawn their request. The Washington Fire Department has withdrawn their request. But the remaining, my discussions with them, they are either contributing 50% of the purchase, or they are in financially dire straits and would need or request the county's assistance if they could make this purchase.
Good.
And there's not currently grant funding to cover these units
There's
available?
So the Rescue Squad Assistance Fund has been on a almost 3-year hiatus. They haven't offered that. They have restored it, and it's going to come through in September. And the level of funding for a defibrillator is $60,000 at 100%, meaning they will fund you at 50-50, $30,000 toward the purchase, or $45,000, or 80-20 at $48,000, I think is what it is. Those are the 2 options. I have tried for the last few days to get the value of this grant cycle. Is it in line, because it's just returning, is it in line with what past grant cycles have been? And we also have 2 agencies that plan on applying for an ambulance at the same time. We as a county agency, we looked at this and we had this discussion back when we replaced our QRV. It's always been my opinion, I hate to compete with our volunteer counterparts. We've stayed out of that because we're all competing for the same dollars. But I do not have a final answer from the state in terms of the value of what they intend to put out there. I do know after a 3-year break that there are a lot of companies that rely each 6 months on these grants to help them move forward, that there's probably be a great demonstrated need. And I'm not sure that as well as we have done with grants, I'm not sure we could rise to the top in terms of all of them. And so we would lose, there's a pricing impact, everything would go up about $12,000 if we don't move in the next 30 days, most likely to the normal pricing or NASPO contract pricing. And then secondly, this grant cycle, the current grant cycle, September 15th is the cutoff. They make the announcements in January. Historically, in the state, they haven't shared this with me, but historically, every January, physio experiences an 8 to 9% increase in their pricing, and they have already begun to drop the trade-in allowance. The trade-in allowance right now it was 8,000 when we began our discussion. They've already dropped it to 6. They said it drops again in November. I have asked, and they've agreed to reinstate where they're going to keep us at 8 for the purpose of this purchase if we decide to move forward. Additionally, our unit that is within 3 years old, and there's an additional 6,000 in trade-in value there. So no, I strongly support granting, getting any resources we can to help pay for these. I'm just not personally confident we can get it in this cycle or next. I'm just trying to advance our technology.
I worry about the precedent of the board making the purchase, and then we want to encourage the grant applications as the first mode for payment on these devices, or any device that's eligible for grant reimbursement or to receive monies from a grant.
Oh, this system has had an incredible history of getting grants and had a good deal of success. I don't think this would preclude anyone from putting in for a grant. They just may be putting in for a grant for something else.
That was my question. The grant that you speak of, are the terms specific to a life pack?
No, it is a Rescue Squad Assistance Fund grant. It can be used for anything that's any EMS related. Most notably, it's the big ticket items are ambulances or quick response vehicles, and then moves down into things like defibrillators, AEDs, extrication equipment, those types of things. It's not specific. Its money comes from $4 from every motor vehicle registered in the Commonwealth of Virginia. $4 is put into this grant fund. Some of it's distributed through the 4 for Life funding that we receive, and I think it's about $10,000 or $11,000 for the entire county. Some goes to fund the operation of the EMS Council, and the remainder then goes into this grant pot.
So the life pack that the county has is only 3 years old,
Just under 3 years.
but it's under contract for 8 years?
Its typical service life is 8 years. And then when we purchased it, we also advanced purchased the service plan, so it's on a service contract for
8 years.
For 8 years total.
But that technology, did I hear you right? That technology is 17 years old?
Well, the basic units was designed 17 years ago. The batteries, the basic, they have made some software upgrades with newer versions. We have one V4, which is this latest version, which allows live streaming. It was the only real change to come that. But at its core, its ability to function as an AED is only limited to adults. So every ambulance that has a LifePack 15 has to carry another $2,000 defibrillator to be used on children, because you can't use it to automatically defibrillate children. A paramedic or an advanced life support provider that has the ability to set the joule setting or the watt second setting for the discharge can use it on a child, but it can't be used as an AED. Two other big features of it: CPR Insight, compression factor, chest compression factor is the number of the time that you do CPR event reduced from the entire length of time of a CPR event. So if you are doing CPR for 10 minutes, and for 6 of those minutes you are actually doing compressions, and you have a 60% compression factor. For studies have shown for someone to have a chance of survival, 60% should be your bare minimum. The gold standard for to improve your success rate is at 80%. We automatically lose 10% just for respiratory, for the pause to breathe. We're already at 90% as our best case scenario. We have to halt CPR as we move you to a cot. We have to halt CPR as we load the cot into the ambulance. When we unload you, all these little gaps start to add up. But one of the largest gaps that really no one thought about because it was required is every 2 minutes you have to analyze a patient's rhythm while you're doing CPR. You have to stop chest compressions during that period. So 10 to 12 seconds for the rhythm to be analyzed. And then if it's a shockable rhythm, another 8 to 10 seconds for for the device to charge up and shock. One of the most remarkable things in the LifePak 35 is it has the ability to discern CPR artifact from the underlying rhythm. So it will every 2 minutes automatically analyze the rhythm while you're doing CPR. And if it's a rhythm that's shockable, it will advise you, and it's charging and it's ready to discharge. So you can pause just for 2 seconds to deliver electrical energy. That I think is a remarkable improvement from where we've been. The other 2 big advances, portability. It's about 22% lighter. It trims 3 pounds off the device. It's now tall and slim, like carrying a briefcase, as opposed to carrying a solid, fully stuffed duffel bag, this wide, awkward. So just going in and out of houses, going in and out of in and out of hallways, stairwells. I think the ergonomics to make it much easier to use. Sir?
Road noise filter?
Yes, it does do road noise filtering as well. I did have a few notes. Oh, and it's 12 lead. Its ability to 12 lead interpretation is designed to identify STEMI, any ST elevated myocardial infarction, which involves the lower chambers of the heart, the 2 that do the real work for you. So its ability they have improved the software, and the LifePak 15 is still using the software version that was done 17 years ago. The LifePak 35 is using today's version, which has a greater percentage of identification of those types of the most critical cardiac. Any heart attack is actually a critical situation, but these are the ones that do the most damaging and offer the most fatality. So it gives us a better opportunity to make an improvement in the patient's outcome. Did that?
Great. So I think if I were to summarize at this point, we have these initiatives. Maybe there will be others or other suggestions where maybe we can help individual companies. And now we're in discussion mode. And obviously there's some time sensitivity on the LifePak front in particular. And I appreciate where Supervisor Smith is coming from regarding grant funding. So clearly at some point, very soon, we're going to have, as a system, including us, we're going to have to make a decision on whether or not to go ahead with the acquisition of LifePaks, recognizing sort of the somewhat uncontrolled variable of grant funding, and just make do a quick cost benefit analysis and decide whether it's smart to forgo significant savings on the possibility that we could grant fund these at some point in the future, and then accepting whatever operational effect not purchasing them would have. Because is it fair to say that LifePaks are, not being in your business, this is a basic, fundamental, critical piece of equipment that each of our companies must have?
When I first started this, LifePaks were only brought out for cardiac patients. We use them to monitor hearts and have the ability to deliver electrical shocks. Over the years, they became the most central piece of equipment on an ambulance. They're used by BLS providers because they monitor our patients' vital signs. They, when I started, we used to have to take blood pressures manually, and then every 5 minutes you want to repeat them in critical patients. These devices do that automatically. They've become probably the most essential piece of equipment on an ambulance or EMS response vehicle.
Oh.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Couldn't we create some sort of county grant program where actually the companies had to submit some sort of show of need and their information on their LifePak current and that kind of stuff, and then the county could determine who is awarded a grant?
So so what you're saying is what a financial instrument or financial mechanism for providing actual support in light of these sort of voluntary offers of assistance.
Because if we set something up now, it could be used later when other items become available.
Yeah.
And you can pick and choose, not the county, but the companies can pick and choose whether they apply.
And we could, I guess, from a county budgeting perspective, have a set aside on an ongoing basis and say we're going to fund it at this level, and this is available to companies for additional support as needed and described. Sure, I think it's a good idea.
There was some preliminary discussion at the clearing meeting about what things the county government could do to help support volunteer systems. And there was some discussion about possibly taking on more, some operational needs or, in terms of capital purchase. And this is probably a good device to begin that type of process because it's standard. You could buy a $150,000 brush truck and you could buy a $700,000 brush truck. Both basically would do the same thing, but to open up the door for something like that, there's a lot more ambiguity, where this is pretty much a standard across the board. But again, those are certainly decisions for this body. I know that the volunteers here work hard on their fundraising. They pound the pavement for grant purposes. I think they've exhausted everything they can. It's a lot to ask them to still have the energy to get up and run calls too. And we don't want to take away from their first mission. And if this can alleviate or reduce some fundraising burden on them, in my opinion, I think it's a good move. But
Well said.
When do you have to place the order by?
Yes, I wanted to clarify, the quote said it was good through October 27th. You threw out 30 days earlier. And so
yeah, I'm sorry. Well, the issue is going to be they're going to have to redo the quote because we reduced it by 1, so it would require a new. I think that they're open. They're certainly amicable to us moving forward as long as they stay in communication. They'll be able to share that we've had an open discussion at the board meeting and this is our next steps. I think we can do this. But again, I can't speak for the rep.
Okay. So where are we currently, would you say, in terms of the total count?
We are at 6.
6, okay.
It was one for us, one for Chester Gap and Castleton, one for Flint Hill, who's said that they could fund 50%, and 2 for Sperryville, and Sperryville could fund 50%.
Okay. Maybe Warren County can throw in some money.
Well, we certainly never want to make our volunteers' jobs more difficult by asking them to do additional work, like more fundraising. I remember when I joined the board and Chief Rebout, and I think at that time Mr. Summers, now Chief Summers, and Larry Grove and I sat down and talked about the equipment line in the county budget every year because it wasn't required in the fire services agreement for the board to fund equipment for the companies, but it was tradition for the board to fund equipment for companies. And I do think that is an important tradition for the companies to know that they can count on the board for equipment that they need.
And they have diverse needs and they have diverse resources to pull from. There are, stations that don't do a lot of transports, which is a good source of funding for other stations. There are stations that may not have a large population base to come out and support their fundraisers. But at the same time, it costs the same amount to heat their building that it costs to heat another building that may be in one of your population centers. So, I think it's important that we're cognizant that organizations have different needs and they have different resources. But thank you for your words, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Darren.
So from my perspective, Darren's, to move this forward, what do you need from us? And do you want us to develop some sort of standardized process?
So that's probably where the only place I fell short was the determination of financial need. I did it by a handshake, but if the correct way is to have some type of standard. I do know they have our chiefs meetings tomorrow night. Their budget said everything will be coming in. I don't know what the process here. Do they collect 990s at those times? Can you look at what their funding is, and is that snapshot an accurate representation of what they may have available? Because they could have a piece of equipment on order that's going to cost several $100,000. They could have money set aside for a future building expansion. So I think that really it does. It may have to come from a panel or one-on-one discussion with someone to help make that determination. But I do know out of the 4 organizations that want to participate, 2 of them are certainly putting their best foot forward to show they have some skin in the game by providing 50% of the funding. And I think the other 2 certainly are probably not in the same financial position.
Well, I think, speaking of reducing burden on people, I think if we could just get it seems to me, if we could get direct communication for the chief of any individual company let's just take life packs in isolation, who have a need, they should just put that need in writing, both in operational and financial context, and send it to you, in my opinion. I don't know that we need to, develop some form or,
Yeah.
I mean, I just think we just need a statement from each of the companies that wants to be part of this purchase. And we need it by our next meeting so we can make a decision.
I'm happy to communicate
Preferably
that.
before then. Yeah, I think
Yep.
that's it.
Yep.
I think they just put in writing in an email to you. I mean, I'm just saying what I think is appropriate.
Yep.
Just say why they need our support in this regard. And that was always the intent of these initiatives. Stated need, reasonable, we'll support it.
I'm happy to facilitate that, and I'm also, thankful for the entire board's support they've given our fire and rescue system, certainly during my tenure, and I know for all those years before me.
Thanks a lot for all your time and explanation.
Yep.
Thank you.
And all your hours.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, now we're going 5-minute recess?
Sure.
Yep, 5-minute recess. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, I got it.
Do you see the dent
A dent?
of my head anyway?
Okay, nothing.
Okay.
We're on the consent agenda. Anyone would like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll move that we adopt the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second it for purposes of discussion.
Okay.
Do we need the contingency budget process item for the manpower study?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
Are we moving forward with the manpower study?
If the consent agenda is approved and the contingency item request is approved for $6,500, I will engage, which is within my award threshold, I will engage an engineering company to look at potential cost efficiencies for all public utilities, water and sewer utilities in the county, to see if there's a more efficient way to operate them.
My understanding is that this could possibly include the town of Washington, and if so, is the town of Washington sharing in the expense of the study?
So I'll weigh in on this. This really is driven. This is really driven from the County Water and Sewer Authority, which manages, as you know, the Sperryville plant, and then the plants at the elementary school and the high school. And so it's really from a how do we keep the Sperryville plant going? How does the Rappahannock County Water and Sewer Authority continue to manage in a cost-effective and fiscally responsible way the two plants at the schools, which are sand filter?
They're different.
Okay, well, then I'll just stop right there, because I'm definitely not an engineer. So it's really driven from efficiency operations standpoint there. Obviously, the town of Washington has its own system. When I have raised the idea with the town of Washington government about maybe there would be a better way to operate everything all under the same umbrella. Their wastewater treatment plant is relatively new, and it's run by a contractor. And so that's their decision. And so really this is about our County Water and Sewer Authority, to the extent that any conclusions reached regarding the most cost-effective way to operate Sperryville and the schools, and maybe the town by virtue of the fact that it's a public utility in our county, that might or might not come out of the study. But this is really, and I want to be clear, the idea of this is not to make or to suggest anything with respect to the town. It's like, here's what we have in the county. The main concern is we have a county water and sewer authority that's managing 3 out of 4 or out of 5 facilities, if you include the town water system as an additional one. And whatever comes out of this study that might inform where the town fits into this, so be it. And then at that point, if there's a clear exclamation point, Sally, Jesse, Raphael, red glasses,
Everybody's watching.
on the piece of paper, and it says, hey, there are economies of scale to be gained here by a different arrangement or coordination with the town, then we can raise that question with them. But I just want to be clear, this says, at least at the outset, this is unrelated to the town only, and it's only related to the town in the sense that the town has its system.
Will we be able to vote on will there be a contract coming to us for this, or we won't see a contract for the study? We won't know the scope of the study? There's no governing documents for the study? There's no attachments, so I'm asking.
This is a funding request. It's well less than $25,000, so it wouldn't be something that would normally come to the board. Certainly, the output would influence decisions, and if the board said you wanted to see the scope, then you could.
Yeah, I'd like to see the scope, please.
Yeah. As contingent, or just, oh, by the way, or. Yeah.
I mean, I would think that a reasonable contingency would be a request for, prior to signature, that the contract for the study be circulated to the board members.
Can we agree to move ahead to fund?
Oh, sure,
Okay.
100%.
Okay.
I'm ill at ease with voting on something that
Yeah.
I don't really understand
Yeah, and
those parameters.
Yeah, and I think bigger picture in Sperryville, in your district, and obviously I sat on the sewer authority, so I have an ongoing interest in this. In Sperryville, you have the plant, and then you have the collection system out in the community, and really, the struggle continues, right? The sewer authority has kept it going, but there are problems.
Right.
And those problems need to be addressed on a long-term basis in a strategic way. And that's, thank you. So that's really where we're starting. And the question is, how can it be done better? How can everything be managed more strategically, cost effectively, economies of scale, et cetera? So, but I agree with you, we should look at the scope, but I think we ought to go ahead with this because we've been talking about it a lot for a long time.
I don't have any qualms about the
Okay,
funding. I
perfect.
just want to
Yeah.
know what we're doing when we do it.
Okay, great.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, appointments.
All right. You've had one vacancy on your Agricultural and Forestal District Advisory Committee for some time, and after having it on your agenda several times, we went and looked at when the next renewal ordinance was scheduled to happen and found it was going to be in 2028. So it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to appoint somebody because the time and influence will happen between then and now, so we set it aside. We've now received an application for a brand new agricultural and forestal district, and so this body will have to meet and consider that district before making a referral to the Planning Commission, who will then make a referral to the Board of Supervisors with several public hearings along the way. So having never really done this here, have never created a new one, we dug into state code to figure out what was required, and applications are required by November 1, and then the board must act within 180 days of November 1. So what you can do and should do now is make sure your Ag and Forestal District Advisory Committee is full of people. I've listed in the agenda who is on the current committee, and I did reach out to Cliff Miller, the elder, to see if he was still interested. I had not heard back from him.
He
So
prefers
the third, or
no, he prefers wise.
the wiser.
He prefers wise Cliff Miller.
Wise Cliff,
for the record.
It could be worse. I think you should let him have that.
So I have not heard back from him because I know he's being pulled geographically, even though I believe he still meets the requirement of the landowner. But you do have a vacancy. So these have been historically very difficult to fill. You either have to be a landowner or a landowner involved in forestal or agricultural activities. At least 4 of your citizen members must have the agriculture and forestal activities under their belt, which you already have that covered. So you really just need a landowner.
Mm-hmm.
So I think most effective would be for board members to reach out to your constituents and find somebody who might, be interested in conservation and own land, and bring names and suggest that they either fill out an application or bring names to the next meeting and make appointment. So,
Okay. So Bruce Loth, who is my constituent, is still on it.
yes.
Okay. So I won't ask him again. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
And we haven't touched base with all these folks, but just looking at the list, they're probably still game.
Are there any volunteers in the meeting today that would help us fill it right now?
Sheila would love to.
It's the first time we're meeting in 5 years, so I mean, it's
Anita
pretty
owns
pretty
land.
slim.
You own land. I think.
Well, we might have volunteered you in your absence, Peter.
I think we need someone with legal expertise, a retired judge. No. Okay. All right. We tried.
All right, so we're gonna find someone and come back.
Yeah, so just encourage them to complete an application or just contact my office.
It pays well and you meet very rarely.
Once
If,
every
once you
5
get through
years.
this application, very likely your next meeting will be in 2028.
Can we talk about the pending application? And I think it would be appropriate. I mean, we have enough people to hold a meeting. Can we circulate a Google poll and circle in on some meeting dates?
Well, my understanding of the state code, we have no local ordinance that speaks to how this is done, so we defer to the state code. The state code appears to be set up that applications received before November 1 will be dealt with after that. So if more applications come in, which I can't imagine because it's the first one in 6.5 years, then you would be handing them all, whatever ones come in by November 1, you will handle within 180 days out the end of the door, approved or denied with whatever restrictions. So I would be hesitant to get ahead of that November 1 date.
I read the code too, and I didn't see anything to preclude us from acting prior to November 1. It said we could receive up until November 1 and that we must act in 180 days, but I didn't see anything to preclude us from acting before then.
Yeah, I don't know. I think ultimately everything is a vote away from the board, so.
I mean, I don't know the sense of urgency, maybe you do.
I just think that these are very common sense protective solutions for the county. And I don't understand why we wouldn't act on them upon receipt. This is a beneficial thing for people to join, to keep their land in agriculture and to know that their neighbors are of a like mind. It could be a discouragement from certain kinds of development that I think all of us don't want to see in the county. And so I just, as a member of this board that hears so much from people about the importance of the character of our county and being protective of it for our future, I think the faster we can act on these sorts of items, the better. It may not be extremely urgent now, but if we get in the habit of always putting it off until in November and acting on it within 6 months, I wouldn't want to fall into that pattern unless we have to.
I think landowners who opt into this program would make that choice to opt into this program. They would equally probably not choose to opt into a rezoning or a special exception to do things that people don't want to see happen. So I don't think it's any more protection than we already have today to avoid development in any particular area.
I agree to disagree because properties change hands.
My understanding of land use versus the forestal districts is land use, unless taken away, protects you. The forestal district only really protects you if land use is taken away.
But also would not allow an owner to apply for rezonings or special exceptions. So I suppose if somebody bound their property in a 10-year agreement with self-imposed development restrictions, if they qualified for land use, they could get for cheaper taxes.
Right.
But notwithstanding that, they would be in a self-imposed restriction on certain land use abilities. If they sold that property, then the property would continue to have those limits to a new owner for the term of the ordinance, which is 4 to 10 years.
So this current application is in which district?
Jackson.
Jackson.
What do you think?
I think, I agree with Supervisor Smith that I think we can probably move this along quickly, but I also think that if we either advertise for this,
No, I mean
this
the app.
vacancy, or if we fill this vacancy in September, then we should have plenty of time to pull together a meeting and then deal with this applicant well before November 1st. I mean, September, you still have 2 months, and I really wouldn't want to see it take 2 months.
So move forward on the finding, the Board of Supervisors, we are going to find someone to fill the position. And then as soon as that's filled, that group can determine when they're going to meet.
And how do these meetings get set by the Forrestal District Board, right?
I mean, in the past, Ms. Summers has just tried to reach out and find a time when everybody can meet.
That's why I think circulating a Google Doodle poll would be great.
Historically, have met before the planning commission meeting.
That's correct.
Because the referral is to the planning commission, and historically, the BOS member on the planning commission has sat on this body.
Yeah, and I'll just say, you know, in my time on this board, once you hit November, especially planning commission, November, gets around Thanksgiving time, people are traveling, things come up, there's a lot of family time, vacations. Then you're into the Christmas holiday for the next planning commission meeting, and all of that entails, and then you're in January. So I just think if there's a way to act on it sooner rather than later, I just think putting something off until November when we know November jams us up is tough.
Let's endeavor to get someone in the seat in September, and then they can meet in October.
Basically
That's
what I
thought
said.
we were talking about.
Yeah, that sounds good to
I
me.
feel like if we get someone in the seat that first meet at our meeting in September, and we're ready to go, why can't we meet before the end of September? And I mean,
Or definitely by,
Time is
or
really-
that group will meet, and then we
you
have
meet at
October
October
meeting.
planning
the
commission.
third week in
September,
October.
October. Okay, good.
And then the other question that I had is, has the property list been forwarded to the Commissioner of the Revenue so she can validate the properties?
Has the list been, no. Ms. Summers is validating that the application form that she had on file actually aligns with state code,
Okay.
which we don't know that it does. We're not really sure what the fee is supposed to be. There were fees set a long time ago. Code of Virginia says you have to adopt fees by ordinance. The board did vote on a fee in 2012, fee schedule in like 2015 or something, but it wasn't an ordinance. So there's some gaps. And doing what we've always done here is a great guide, but I wouldn't stake my reputation on it. I want to make sure we're doing it right.
So Michelle's working on the comparison, which again should be done before we get to the next month.
Is there anything to preclude the members of, the current members of the committee from receiving a copy of the application?
Well, we need to make sure it's complete and has all the information that's required.
Okay, and after that, they'll receive it. What's the timeline for that?
There's no stipulated timeline in the code, but once it's complete, it can be sent.
I think we received this in May, so when is it anticipated to be done?
I don't have a date for you. If you want to prescribe one, vote's always in order.
Well, it's
I was
August.
going to say
and we're
that
in a
in
pl-
September.
Yeah, it should be done by September 1st.
Okay.
All right. Were you good?
I'm good.
Okay.
Where are we?
Old business.
Okay.
So we're not going to set a date for staff
Yeah.
to complete the work?
End of September.
Okay, are we going to have a motion and a vote so staff is clear about the expectation?
We think we
Gary's
need
here.
one.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
So the application will be complete by the end of September, and we'll have the additional appointee in September as well.
Sounds good.
We don't control the applicant, but we will make sure if it's incomplete, we will make sure they know what the gaps are as soon as possible.
Sounds good. Thank you for clarifying.
All right, open forum, public comment procedures.
Board talked about this at your last meeting. There was a discussion of whether perhaps a policy should be prepared or alternatively, modification or amendment to Chapter 30, which is your meetings chapter of the local county code. The board asked Mr. Goff and I to edit the ordinance, which we have done and shared with you in the agenda materials.
Okay.
Pretty limited modifications. I heard a couple comments earlier. I didn't really track them during public comment.
I think, there's a printed copy here that Sally was kind enough to.
I
Did you get
got
that?
it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the work on this, and I think it's important, and I think I'd like to put forward a motion that we authorize staff to advertise the Chapter 30 ordinance amendment for public hearing during our September meeting, and you can put it, I would ask in addition that it be put on the 7 o'clock docket, since it seems like there's public interest in it. And that's my motion, and then we can hear what people have to say. But I think it's much ado about nothing, and I think things work pretty well here, and I don't think we have to, in a heavy-handed way, make huge changes to the way we operate. But I also think that some caution in this regard is sensible, given the times we're living in, and so. Hopefully, these very modest proposed changes ultimately will be palatable, or perhaps in some slightly amended form will be palatable for the public as a whole. So I'd say we move forward with the hearing on it.
Right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it for, as
Discussion.
Yeah, for discussion. I think it's just really important to hear a little bit more from our constituents and our community, and to be super transparent about it. I think anytime, this is the avenue by which we do hear from our constituents, so I think they get nervous. They see it as maybe limiting them, or taking something from them. I think it's important that, to Mr. Whitson's point, the changes are modest, and I think structure and rules are also embraced. So I think we should hear from the public.
So is there leeway to address comments if they needed to be addressed? Do you see anything in that needs to be addressed?
Well, I think this is a good point, that to allow a citizen to speak again, to respond if a board member wishes to ask a question. So not limited to just an applicant or the applicant's attorney.
Right.
So if a neighbor wants to say, and you all have a question, I mean, it's your meeting. And the reason why you're allowing this public comment is to get neighbor input, but it's your meeting. So I think we should amend C2, to include a board member wanting to speak to someone who'd already addressed the board.
I think
To
we
allow that.
talked about that before, and if we allowed one person to speak to the board, we were going to have to open it up to anybody else here that wanted to speak. We just have to know that's going to be part of it.
And you would, as the chairperson, make that kind of a judgment beforehand based on the factors that are set forth. I also noted that Judge Clemens came to my office a number of years ago after one of our more contentious public hearings, and she had an excellent point that it was allowed comment at an additional meeting, as I recall, and that didn't jive with her nor with me. So I think the idea is that's why it's limited to the same meeting. Now, if you continue a meeting, then that's the same meeting. Okay, but it's limited to that public hearing or to that meeting. Can't reopen it all anew without any notice, nobody knows to come talk, and so that's the discipline that flows by that language.
All right, any other discussion?
I don't think this is ready for prime time debut yet via newspaper ad. I think we would do better to put it on the evening agenda for 1 month and take additional public feedback and then advertise it, because I think you're going to have quite a bit of public feedback on this.
We've been talking about this for multiple months now.
Yeah, I think that this is going to discourage people from public comment. I know that the kind of dinner bell on this is that it protects people's freedom of speech. I have to say, from my perspective, I don't see that. It makes follow-up questions and interactions very subjective, and I worry that it puts the board in peril, because if this isn't followed exactly, then we will have gotten ourselves in trouble.
And I would just say that we can keep talking about it, or we can throw down the gauntlet and say, look, here's the proposed amendment, and give everyone something to hang their hat on. And then there's a more specific basis on which to collect public comment, because to Chair Donahay's point, we could continue to go back and forth without something tangible for people to comment on. So I think there is productivity to be taken from putting an ordinance down and saying, all right, we're proposing to adopt this. And if the courtroom fills up with a lot of people who have a real problem with the plain language of the proposed amendments, then at that point we can forego a vote. Or if there's little additional input, we can vote. But I think there is something to say for just after this has been out there for some time to say, and I think Art in a nimble way has said, all right, we heard one more comment, we'd alter this provision and go with this slightly amended version of this revised ordinance language. Let's just put it out there, and if there's significant public response to it in its draft form, then we don't have to vote on it. But it's like, let's get the road on the show, as they say.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Thank you.
Hear Ms. Comer say.
Ms. Comer?
I said aye.
All right. RFP number 24-001.
Yes, the board's been working on this project for quite some time. This is the architectural and engineering services in support of a new or expanded Rappahannock County Courthouse. As you're well aware, the county released a request for proposals, received several written proposals, shortlisted that down to a group of firms who came and provided a presentation to a small committee of individuals, including local stakeholders in the court services, judges and clerks and judges and commonwealth attorney, several individuals. That group, having heard from the several offerers, selected a preferred offerer, and that has been discussed with the board several times now in closed meeting. Pursuant to the Code of Virginia and competitive negotiation process, I've been working with that firm to set up a contract form for the preliminary work to identify a preferred concept, and then the follow-on work to actually design a structure, whether it be an expansion or a new building for a new court facility. The detail of the scope is the contract's based on an AIA standard document with several changes. Those changes have been negotiated back and forth. I did lean on a local architect who was on the committee who used to own a firm and provided several suggestions that were incorporated. Mr. Goff has reviewed it as well. The meat of this actual agreement, though, is in Exhibit A, and that's the detailed scope of work for the first part of the scope that will get us through to having two concepts submitted to the board for an ultimate decision on how to move forward from there. The cost for that is $210,486 and is expected to take 15 weeks. Feedback from the board previously was that the firm should report to the board during each regularly scheduled month, and that is picked up in that letter proposal, Exhibit A. It's actually shown right now as a track changes, so the board could see where that was plugged in. And so it did change the schedule just a little bit and change the fee just a little bit to make sure that the hours were in for that particular work. Mm-hmm. Once this part of the work is done, then there would be another negotiation session to set the fee and hours and detailed scope for the full design, which would be very costly, and I shared some kind of preliminary numbers with the board previously on that, which could be 8 to 10% of the cost of the capital project. So you have before you a contract vehicle that is ready to move forward if the board would like to move forward, and I can try to answer questions. Mr. Goff can try to answer questions. Glavany Homes was very easy to work with outside of me and their principal basically being on vacation all of June during separate parts of June. So it put us a little bit behind.
Okay, I'll put forward a motion that we move to authorize the county administrator to execute the provided agreement for preliminary courthouse design services between Rappahannock County and the architectural firm of Glavany Homes as presented.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Did I read correctly that there's no anticipated budget for this courthouse?
There's no anticipated budget.
There's no budget constraints to bear in mind. I didn't see, one of the questions was, you know, what is your anticipated amount you're going to spend? And we didn't seem to have an answer for that, and that seems like a very precarious situation.
Yeah, so the AIA architectural form is set up once the project is identified, after a concept is selected. A construction budget will be set then, and part of this scope, they'll provide some estimates. And the board, after reviewing those, might seek to alter the project. It's hard to say. But before that we move on with the second half of the work, that number will be identified, and then it's a very important part of the agreement going forward, because if the project comes in higher, with a few caveats, the architectural firm has to redesign at their cost.
I mean, I know it's the feeling of the board that if we do these two designs, we will end up with a clear winner. I just have to say I don't find that to be compelling. I'm equally convinced we could end up with two designs, neither of which will have the will to move forward. Which is unfortunate.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I would just say that I say this as respectfully as possible, but where we ended up with the last design iteration, at least from my perspective and input received from anyone I heard from, with the exception of one person, I didn't receive from my constituents any indication that where we ended up on the last design was something that people were comfortable with or could accept. And so to some extent, while we're not starting over completely, I think from an overall concept and location, scale, look, feel, configuration, I mean, you name it. I think because of the overall reaction, I speak only for myself and I'll leave it to others to express what they heard from constituents where we ended up last time, I think puts us in a position where we'd be remiss to not allow fresh eyes on what we have in terms of existing buildings, what we have in terms of available land, and where we want to go as a county from an overall look and feel perspective. Give that firm a chance to present to us their view of what we might be able to do with. And I fully accept that expansion of this building probably does not work, but I think Supervisor Carney mentioned last time we had this discussion that perhaps there's some in between where existing buildings could be combined and linked together. So to the extent that the public taxpayers will be funding this, I think we owe everyone a fresh look at options. And so I think it's perhaps an oversimplification to say, well, we shouldn't fund looking at expanding this building, but we should fund looking at something new. I think it's overall concept and where things would fit vis-a-vis our existing courthouse row and how the buildings are aligned and what space we have. So to me, it is a bit of starting over and a fresh look, and I'm comfortable with that, given the overall not favorable public reaction to the last iteration of the design.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
Town boundary line change request.
This is a bit of an update and a procedural step. As the board's aware, this has been going on a very long time related to expanding the town boundary in the area of Rush River Commons. The Commission on Local Government reviewed the agreement between the town and county, and there's a very long report, which is quite good actually, attached to this agenda item. And the CLG has confirmed that they believe it is in the interest of the Commonwealth for this to happen, or at least not against the interest of the Commonwealth. That checks a box along this process that is mandated by the Code of Virginia, Section 15.2, 3400 sequit at whatever the next step and last step is that both the town and the county must hold a public hearing and adopt an ordinance expressing your joint interests or separate interests to do this same thing. The ordinance is really very procedural. It'll recite in the whereas paragraphs the various state code sections, and then basically say that you're agreeing to adopt the agreement that you've already negotiated.
I did attend the Commission on Local Government meeting, which was interesting in the sense that I frankly had no reason until that night to even think about what the Commission on Local Government in the Commonwealth of Virginia does. But the commissioners drove all the way up here from Richmond and points beyond and very thoughtfully discussed their view of this town-county agreement. And I thought it was very thoughtful. There were a handful of people who spoke in support of the proposed boundary line adjustment. And I understand that the report summarizes some of those comments and the commissioner's conclusions and the recommendation that we move ahead. So with that, I'll go ahead and put forward a motion to authorize the county administrator and county attorney to prepare the necessary ordinance language to proceed with the boundary line change for consideration of adoption by our board and to schedule a public hearing for our September meeting. Thank you.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I'll second. What the heck? All the pressure's been on Donna and Christine. Discussion. No discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Thank you. New commercial activity and related matters.
Sure. I think probably for the first time since I asked for this to be a standing agenda item, we have something significant to talk about. And it's really just for public awareness. If you have not been reading the Rappahannock News regularly or social media, maybe you're not aware of this. But I did want to bring up a situation that's come out of the Little Washington's construction of a large pond here in the town of Washington. And I should say at the outset that I'm a big supporter of the Inn at Little Washington. I'm a big supporter of Petro O'Connell and everything that the inn does for our local economy, directly and indirectly, and pushing tourism dollars our way. And sales tax revenue from the inn flows into our county coffers, and it's not insignificant. Huge employer. And so with great caution, I just want to say that as the inn proceeds with its expansion plans in the town of Washington, this pond project, which was appropriately discussed by inn management with potentially affected neighbors before the project started, nevertheless is sort of taken on a life of its own. And the pond project, I think, in terms of scale and disruption to the folks who live around the project, has been, to put it mildly, a bit shocking. And so I really raised this just as a point of caution, as the inn and other businesses and our otherwise very slow to change and very tranquil community as they undertake big disruptive projects. I think this pond project is proof that good communication with citizens, good communication with affected neighbors, good communication with county government and town government is critical to making sure these types of projects, given Rappahannock County as static as it is, that these things go smoothly. This has not gone smoothly at all, and I think it's regrettable. And I think that if county leadership had been made aware that this project was coming around, and county staff knew what was coming, and we've been fully informed, then maybe we could have worked with the inn maybe to preempt some of the controversy that stemmed from this. So I think it's good in the sense this pond project and what's come out of it is a good reminder that as the inn enters into a significant expansion phase, it's a good reminder of the need for open and regular communication. And it's certainly a burden for me, and I will do my very best to have an open line of communication with the Inn at Little Washington. And I have that, but I think I need to strengthen my channels of communication with the management there so that we know these things are coming and that we can all be prepared to make sure that everyone affected knows what's coming and what it means for them. So,
Thank you for that.
I wondered if in this whole thing there's any improvement the county could make on its farm pond definitions or language in the ordinance, in the zoning ordinance. I know we had an incident in my district a few years ago where someone built a farm pond, which is a pond on their farm. Are they using it for farming purposes? Probably not. It's fed water from a waterway that historically has flooded. And so rightly the neighbors worry about having a pond next door. So, I mean, I just wonder if is there a will to look at the zoning ordinance language on farm ponds?
This is
It's not.
This is regulated in Chapter 98, which is erosion sediment control, which was just readopted to align with the updated state language.
Okay.
And so the agricultural exemptions are pretty clearly laid out in the state code. It's just, there's no objective measure in the code. So it can be subjective if and when it applies. Clearly, we don't apply erosion sediment control when somebody tills their field, even though it leads to a ton of disturbed area. But then if somebody in their backyard scrapes off 10,001 square feet of soil, then we got to have silt fence and all this stuff. And so it's a subjective review at every case. And normally, if we have the opportunity to see things ahead and dialogue with a potential permittee, then we can guide them. This company had an engineering company inform them that they didn't need to do anything. And so they followed the advice of that firm. And that firm relied on some communication with representatives of the Corps who were maybe answering part of one question and not all of the questions. So I think all of the questions will eventually be answered on this one, maybe just not in the order that would be smoothest.
It would have been good to have all the questions asked and all the questions answered on the front end of the process instead of as we're, now having to sort of, as you said earlier, dot I's and cross T's on the back end. And it's just, I think it's a situation that could have been avoided if we had all been carved in on it. And that's not in any way a power play. It's just, to me, common sense that when you're undertaking a big project like this, and you're going to have a potential adverse effect on neighbors, and maybe the easy way is to ask your engineer to find out what the rules are. They don't apply because of X, Y, and Z. I think the right thing to do is to nevertheless at least let people know what's coming, even if you believe you're exempt from all erosion and sediment control requirements.
One of the first things we did reach out to the town and say, is this allowed by zoning? In your district, is an agricultural use in this district allowed? And the answer was, yes, it's allowed by right. We're like, okay, past that threshold.
Interesting.
We move
But
on
it's
from there.
just been catch up ever since. So.
And I think in general, in this community, we want to get out of the way of true agriculture.
For sure.
And allow farmers to do what they need to do on their land when they need to do it without being encumbered by state law that we deliver. But when you get into these fringe areas, and in our county, most of the county is zoned agriculture, so sometimes it does encroach on kind of our residential areas. Sometimes it doesn't look right, but.
And I should say I had a very productive and helpful conversation with Mr. Gannon, who's now the general manager at the inn, who took over when Bob Fass left. And he was very forthcoming, and I believe that the inn had good intentions and thought that they had adequately communicated with neighbors. It's just the scale, I think, of the project caught everyone off guard. Yeah. And no doubt excavation is not a pretty process. And so there's something to say for just the shock value of digging up a beautiful field and digging a hole and kind of the human response to that. So there's a lot of emotion embedded in this, but I do think that it would have been good on the front end to have many questions asked and many questions answered. And hopefully going forward, that'll happen with other expansion-related initiatives in the town of Washington.
Thank you for that.
Thanks for sharing that, Karen.
County, oops.
So I want to say that once this became pulled into the headlights of the state DEQ and the Fed's Army Corps of Engineers, we promptly settled in behind those two agencies and allowed them to do their job, and we'll follow right along with them.
Yeah.
Wise. Construction and renovation.
I've included here a quick narrative of where we are on different projects. If you want, I'll just run through them very quickly. Historical building envelope, the design plans of that work is pretty well targeted, but there's an opportunity that I'd like to talk to you in another agenda item about potential grant funding that I think could be very helpful and spread the county dollar. So we've kind of paused things until we know where the board wants to move on that. You just took action on the RFPs for the courthouse, so that design work is going to roll on. I have a tentative kickoff meeting, I think August 12th, depending on what happened today. The EMS Sheriff Garage Processing Building, we talked about that a little earlier. That's really been on the side burner. I've not been able to put any attention on that. I've tried to get an engineering company to do the sewer work, and they just aren't. It's not working out, and I don't have the time to do it. But fortunately, the Leachate Pond project is essentially done, so I can transition some time from that to the other project.
What year did that start?
Well, I mean, as soon as I got here, it was.
That's what I was thinking.
But DEQ, for all they do, great.
Here you had all the rain.
Changing landfill permits is a slow process. And I don't think the pandemic didn't help much. So that's thankful and turned out pretty good. Thank you to Weaver Works, they did a good job.
I saw you planting plants.
Yeah, Sustainability Matters wanted to be involved. I happily used the native seed mix that they recommended, and so they wanted to go out and dance on it. And so I joined them. The generator project for the school board office garage, all the submittals were approved. That equipment order was released, and so the generator is supposed to ship by December 20th. The transfer switch a little before that. So in the meantime, I'll be working on invitation for bid for the contractor to put that stuff in. So as much is done before it arrives, it can kind of be dropped where it needs to go. Then the elementary school generator project on the consent agenda today, the board authorized us to kind of move forward on that and fund the engineering part of that. So now that we've got that, I'll get that engineering agreement signed up, and we'll get marching on that. That'll define for sure the size of the generator and everything was estimates up till now. And then we'll be able to order that equipment, which will take forever to come in. And then lastly, giving you an update on this county campus network infrastructure, there's an agenda item on the agenda today about that, and I just got some pricing Friday, which is just very, very high, and so I want to run the board through that and talk about how we can move that forward in the best way. We have been testing some voice over internet protocol phones free. They work great, even with a less than great network. But the problem is, if you don't have a reliable network, then you don't have a reliable phone system. Yep. And that's not gonna, those two things don't work together. So we have issues. So that's what I got to say. Any questions?
No, it's a really good update,
Yeah,
for sure.
Appreciate that. Which leads us to the H2.
So the Virginia 250 Preservation Fund, what are they calling this? The semi-quincentennial?
Yeah.
Okay. Apparently that's 250 years.
Yeah, sesquicentennial.
Yeah.
I just celebrated my sesquicentennial anniversary.
But that's 200 years though, right?
Yeah.
So this is 250.
250 sesquicentennial.
So it's a half of a quincentennial, which is 500. So that's why it's semi-quincentennial, 250. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
I didn't make that up.
I forgot about the semi.
Yeah.
All right.
At any rate, Department of Historic Resources has $20 million in the 2024-2026 biennial budget, and they have a grant program to do exactly what it looks like we're going to do, which is work on some historic buildings. And most of our buildings out here are historic. It occurred to, Bonnie saw this flash up, she passed it to me, I said, oh, that looks pretty cool. I sent it to the architect, he said, yeah, boy, that looks like right down our alley, and he said, the courthouse and the windows and all that, it really have excitement for that. So I would like to submit the pre-application and application. I'm not really sure what for, and I want to work with the architect, Mr. Harnsberger with Legacy, who's working on the envelope project, did the porch that you saw and all that, to devise an application that is as sexy as possible for the GHR and this program. They say that you can ask for up to $750,000, and then they say it's a 1/3 match, and they, or that you can ask for up to $1 million. But so apparently, if you ask for $750,000, you have to have a $250,000 match. I don't get the terminology. That's what they had in their packet. The board has allocated $1 million to the envelope project right now. So I think this is a way to spread those dollars further than they would have otherwise gone, or free up some potentially for something else if we can get a bunch of it done, supported through this project. It does slow us down because now we wait for this grant cycle to work its way through before we start spending money. So my ask to the board is, do you want me to slow things down and find the best possible project and apply for it through this grant program?
How much would we be slowed down?
I don't recall. I think I did know the answer to that. But
It seems to be a recurring theme today.
Timeline.
We pursue grant money.
so pre-applications would due the 30th of August, and then grant awards will be announced in late 2024. So a few months.
Not bad.
No, it's great.
Let's do it.
So probably reasonable. And I just don't have a project for you, and I don't want to necessarily just wait because pre-application closes August 30th, so we won't be meeting again before that. So I'm
Okay.
asking you to have some deference to figure it out and put in as big a package for stuff we were going to do anyway.
Do it. I see.
I make a motion to move to authorize the county administrator to apply for grant funding as deemed most appropriate by him and the county's historic preservation architects, while limiting local match investment to no more than $1 million.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I would just say that I did talk to Morale Calbian at the Department of Historic Resources a couple weeks ago, and she continued to reiterate her willingness to help us on any projects that she could.
Good. And I should say that Ms. Comer forwarded this to me as well. So
Oh, great.
As you see different things, don't assume that we've seen it.
Yep. All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. And,
VOIP.
yep,
All right, so just talked about this. Been way back in October 2023, came to the board. It was really sheriff-led initiative where she needed to replace the video cameras in the courtroom and around. And was working with Daley and Verkada and brought an opportunity. And Bonnie and I kind of came in on the tail end of that, started to figure out what is this about. And the board approved the $217,000, $150 project for the camera system, which was largely going to be funded by the courthouse security fees that are collected on court cases. Well, those are all IP-based cameras that need to connect into your network infrastructure. And they're like, well, we'll just tie into your network. And we're like, great, we don't have one.
surprise.
This, we've talked before, our buildings are not connected on any kind of network. A couple over there are connected, these two are connected, the sheriff's office by itself. So hit a big pause button, said we need to go back to the drawing board on this and figure out how are we going to connect all these buildings. So we've been doing a lot of work on that. I reported previously on phase 0, which was test what we have, and the answer to that was pretty much everything you have doesn't work right. So we said, okay, I guess that means we need to start over. Friday late, I was out of town. I finally got their proposal Friday late and looked at it, and I needed a defibrillator. I was very shocked at what they included. And they said, first, there needs to be more granularity, and these were just big chunks of numbers that are thrown in here. And I just added some stuff late this afternoon. But let me pull up this little presentation that they provided, and I'll just run through this really quickly. Um, So, we said, right now we have a bunch of individual Comcast modems that we're paying for every month at several different places along this row. And we don't need to do that, right? We connect the buildings and have one point out to the world that has proper firewall and everything. That would be the sheriff's office where there's fiber already coming into that building. Great, good plan. Now we have to connect all these buildings with fiber, which aren't even connected with anything today. So it would link these buildings. The EMS headquarters would be a copper connection, and then the old admin building would be a copper connection, not fiber, because those are, kind of not central. Do that, so that's new rack, new proper switches and everything, and any of the network hardware that would be installed, switches, routers, things that do bits and bytes that I don't really know how they work, would be remotely manageable by an IT professional, because we don't have an IT department, and we don't know how to do this. And I feel very insecure that we are protected in any way from intrusions. But it's hard to have intrusion when you don't have a network, so.
Aren't you glad you came back to Rappahannock County, Bonnie?
So, hey, I'm right there with her. Just the IT department would be dealing with all this. We don't have that.
Well, you're the IT department, Gary.
Exactly.
You
I'm
just
also,
didn't know that how long I hired you.
like Bonnie's first day at the office, I was the car decal labeling department that day.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't laugh. Gary, I appreciate your level of detail on this, but if you're frustrated by it, I don't see the benefit of us sitting through it.
Well, I just want you to understand.
Because I trust you to work
I want
through
you
these
to
details.
know what we need to do.
Well, the phone bills.
Can you put the bottom line up
Yeah,
front for us?
Sally Jesse.
So the other thing that would do would be add wireless access across the campus.
Just
right?
do it. I mean,
Right. So
the phone bills alone, I used to call them out, and I got tired of calling them out. It's unbelievable.
So here's the bluff, okay?
Thank you. And thank you.
Bottom line up front. Big lot. This is not additive to the 217, right? This is instead of the 217. But these are a lot of different numbers that add up to a lot of money. And so you can see infrastructure, 70,000. That's the stuff. And then the cameras, which are the stuff for the camera system, that was part of the 217. The telephony is the cheap thing. Unfortunately, you can't do it unless you have a network. And then the engineering, deployment, and project management. That is the structure. That's the number I said, well, what am I supposed to do with a number that's 315? That doesn't do anything for me. And then the 15,000 per year. I mean, there needs to be some work there, but that's the remote managed, make sure everything's patched, make sure all the computers have the virus updates, all that stuff that somebody should be paying attention to that nobody's paying attention to. So if you look back in the packet, I did add detail to that $315,000 number that I was able to get. I had a meeting with them this first thing this morning, and then they provided some information. So labor for the fiber connections and doing all that, 62,000. Materials for the above was like 100,000. It seems like a lot of money. So I think we need to drill down and get more detail on what all these things are. The Ethernet cable, that's for the 7 buildings. For all of the buildings, so that's all these buildings, my office, county attorney's office, the building and zoning office would be actually having structured wiring in that building. I went to install the test phone in Michelle's office, and she's like, "Oh, we don't have wiring." So they do everything wirelessly down there. Like, oh, great. Good thing the phones work wirelessly, but not reliably. So we're actually testing that one wirelessly right now. But she and Rich, they don't plug into the network. Just like shock.
High security.
Yeah. So you can see how this lays out. It's a ton of money that I need to get some comfort level with the bill of materials. Why are these numbers what they are? But I did, for at least based on what Mr. Whitson was saying earlier, we do pay right now for phones for Cooperative Extension and a bunch of others, but it's $17,400 a year for phones that we pay for right now, and they really don't work very well. And no, the existing cost is $32,000, and the update cost could be $17,000. So you could be spending off around 15 grand of savings a year, which is great. It would just take a long time for $15,000 a year to do all these other things. But it's not only a cost savings play. The current phone system, which I should have taken a photograph from the basement of the jail, if it breaks, we're in trouble.
Right.
They don't make them. I mean, it's an eBay thing, and we've been there before. So we've got to do something. We can't really leverage a VoIP system until we have a proper network. We don't have a proper network. We have really old buildings, which makes running anything difficult. And we could try to have, the inmates do it like was done back in the day, or kind of the local contractor try to do it. It's too much for them, and you might not have the quality of work that is going to be good enough for enterprise, or we're trying to also move some of our servers to the cloud, because who's maintaining our servers? So we have a lot of gaps, and it looks to be very expensive.
How did
And
we
I'm trying to
pick-
find it to be less expensive.
Remind me how we picked out, did we?
They were engaged with sheriff on the camera project. They've also worked on the MDT project.
And they have a statewide.
And they have a statewide contract.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you just need to, as you said, get a bill of materials to drill down into.
Either have to get comfortable this is the right stuff for the right price, or something.
Okay, so you're gonna do that.
Yeah. So that's where we are.
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks. Madam Chair, I don't know if others would be amenable. It is 5 p.m. We're reconvening at 7.
Mm-hmm.
I feel some guilt because the next 2 items are on me. And they're important, but I also recognize the need for everyone to get some food and take a break. Would it be possible just to move those to 7 o'clock, and including the committee and board updates, just to manage our time?
I'll second that motion.
Hold on.
I would just, everything else remaining on the 2 o'clock docket, we just
Move
put it to 7, and I assure you I will do it.
So at the end of the evening business?
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me.
Well, it's not, I would recommend it not go before the 2 public hearings.
Okay.
After that is public comment, and then after that is the further discussion on signs.
Why don't we put everything in before signs, because signs could take a while.
Except for you might have public here who wants to really hear about signs and who might not care as much about cemeteries. I'm sure everybody does, but.
Anita does. So, yeah, we could do it after
Signs.
signs. Yeah, but the park property thing is also important. They're important.
It's all important.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or do you just want me to quickly go through those? I mean, it's up to you.
It's 5:07. Can you do it in 10 minutes?
Sure.
Go.
Okay. So cemeteries, a citizen, this is really for discussion, and frankly, I just wanted to plant a seed for everybody to think about. So a citizen approached me about our current active cemeteries in the community, whether they're tied to specific churches, congregations, or whether they're kind of standalone cemeteries operated by a formal or loose organization. And really, this is a two-part, the cemetery question is 2 parts as I see it. Number one, what, if any, role might the county government have in supporting financially or operationally the continuing upkeep of our existing cemeteries, recognizing that, like a lot of things in our community, volunteers are aging and people are less inclined to volunteer, and recognizing that cemetery maintenance and operation and management oftentimes comes down to volunteers. So I did pose this question to Gary from a Code of Virginia perspective. I'll let him jump in on this in a second, but that's the first question. Would it be prudent for us to assume some sort of role in assisting assisting these loose, formal, informal organizations in the management and upkeep of existing cemeteries? So that's the first thing. Second thing is, given that Sperryville, the cemetery in Sperryville is a perfect example, given that many of our cemeteries are already close to capacity, at what point would it be appropriate, or would it be appropriate to discuss the idea of a community cemetery, just looking ahead in the future? And I recognize that that's no small thing, that it would involve infrastructure, and it's not a casual, hey, you know, maybe we could purchase some land to create a county cemetery. It's more than that, but it's both a capacity and it's a management and financial support question. And I don't know if Gary wants to just talk about what he learned in his review.
Yeah, just high level. Local governments can't have cemeteries. It's a government service. You can do that. I'd rather you not, but you know, if that's what you tell us to do, we'll do the best cemetery ever. The Catholic Church is about double the size of their cemetery.
There's
which
still
is
spots
good.
available in Flint Hill, I believe, at that cemetery as well.
And there are some specific types of cemeteries where the government can get involved in funding, but not your just run-of-the-mill, like old Civil War or even older or old African American cemeteries. There's some specific code sections that speak to those. That's not what we're talking about here. But there are other code sections that pretty much say the board just can't fund a private cemetery or a church cemetery.
Yeah.
You can't do those things. But doing some research, other bodies have found that what you can do is have an open access grant type program that anybody can apply for cemeteries. And then I think you can work through some legal angles to allow some grant opportunities open to anybody to potentially help fund, whether it's a funding gap or something. I think that's really where you're funneled in on, if the board would ever want to get there and provide those sort of services.
Yeah, and the one thing I would also say, and I haven't talked to the jail superintendent about this, but to the extent that we're using regional jail trustees for various projects in the county, recognizing there's limited capacity there in terms of availability of inmates, but maybe formalizing a program to help some of our cemetery teams, management teams, with grass cutting and upkeep, where we involve our jail inmates if there's some way to do that in a more predictably scheduled way, and maybe that would help also. But you get the gist of it. I wanted to raise this at the request of a citizen who I respect a lot. And I attend pretty regularly Trinity, and I believe that Trinity's cemetery, which is in Woodville, I believe that Mr. Acre is, I'm pretty sure this is the case, has donated some land to expand that cemetery using some Eldon land. So, I mean, there's expansion occurring, and I just wanted us to at least have it on our radar, and all think about what we might be able to do going forward.
I wonder, it would be interesting to know if there's an inventory of the existing cemeteries, maybe at the Historic Society, maybe the Historical Society has one, and we could map them.
There is loose information. The definition starts to creep, and so, and even in this county today, you can get buried in your backyard.
And there's family cemeteries too.
So they're everywhere.
Yeah.
So that really starts to unravel. The General Assembly tried to legislate that a few years ago, and mandate localities to make this list, and we're like, whoa, time out. There's no end to that.
Right.
And it didn't make it through.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think there would be interest in private graves or family plots, but just those run by associations, religious organizations, things like that. It would be interesting to know, and offhand I don't recall that being in the comp plan. That could be an interesting addition.
They're in the zoning. I mean, the use is in zoning, and
Right.
they're allowed through certain hoops depending on where you are and the size. So if we might have permits for something like the one at the Catholic Church, that's permitted.
Right.
Right. So
yeah. Okay.
Interesting.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah, sure. Next topic is, and I don't know if you have that drawing. So
this is a kind of a
Google
sneak peek at some early parcel fabric GIS.
GIS, okay. Hopefully Chris,
Should we be looking at this?
hopefully Chris Parrish is not on Zoom.
Here's the park.
Okay, there's the park, and what's currently for sale? That's the question.
This 186 acre parcel has been subdivided
Okay.
into like 4 parts. And this parcel has a line, something like that.
Okay. And the park is where
So this
again?
is here, so it's like 50 acres.
Okay, so the gist of this is that
Mostly wooded.
this parcel, this wooded parcel
Rush River.
is on the, I guess that's nominally the east side of the Rush River. The park's on the other side. And this property is currently for sale. And I asked a couple of citizens who I thought might be interested in maybe buying it and then offering it to the county or letting the county use it. All paths led to the Krebser Fund, which is now really part of, or at least managed by, the Piedmont Environmental Council. So I talked to Mr. McCarthy, I talked to various current and former members of the Krebser Fund board. I haven't talked to Don Walk yet, and I need to do that. But really the question is, would the Krebser Fund or Piedmont Environmental Council be interested in acquiring this property as part of a logical expansion of the park? And, you know, conceptually, I guess in my mind, I'm thinking hiking trails and joining the two with bridges over the Rush River, etc. On the one hand, perhaps pie in the sky, but on the other, it seems anecdotally that there is money out there for these types of things. And today's theme, grants, and I mean, we've been talking about it in how many contexts today, but I raised this with the board because I have mentioned it to the Park Authority leadership, specifically Becky Burr, and I know she's talked to the property owner, or is planning on talking to the property owner, and I've mentioned it to PEC/Krebser Fund, and I really think this is an incredible opportunity for our county to expand our recreational facilities in a way that fits Rappahannock County, a wooded property that would allow the property to expand in a direction away from the neighbors. And I think that it could be a real boost in what's becoming a wonderful recreational facility at the park. And so I throw it out there because I just wonder what we could do. And we've been burdening Mr. Curry and Ms. Jewell with a lot. Even today, we've been burdening them with a lot. And so I don't know if it's reasonable to say to our team, our county team, hey, can you go see if there's any money out there for this? But I guess I would just ask all of us to engage with organizations like PEC, the Krebser Fund, and anyone else you can think of to see what we can do with this. Because it just, to me, seems like an awesome opportunity.
Beautiful piece of property, that's
Yeah.
for sure.
And I haven't been on it, so I don't know if, you know, my thinking about hiking trails, et cetera, is even makes sense, but I've certainly looked at the property from the park side of the Rush River, and it seems like it would be ideal. So
And it's $1 million property, right?
that's the
It's the market price. That's the asking price.
Asking
Still
price.
for sale.
You know,
The market hasn't spoken yet.
we're a small county and, you know, we rely on volunteers to take care of our park. I just don't know that this kind of an expansion, it's a big ask for a volunteer organization.
yeah, and
And
for-
I mean, they've been having trouble, I mean, the playground replacement and the basketball court, I don't think has been refinished yet. And I mean, there's a couple things that need done on the park itself now. It's a lot. Another 50 acres is more,
yeah, and I
a
just
lot more.
right. So it's on the market, and I just think we'd be remiss to at least not acknowledge the opportunity. I understand your point. I I mean, it's just, I think, again, it's really a question of to the extent that we individually think it'd be an interesting idea to at least see what's out there. And yeah, I mean, operationally, if you were to build a trail network or something, no doubt that puts a burden on volunteers. But on the flip side, you know, if the property's currently for sale, maybe acquisition now and a plan for it later would be a logical sequence of events. So I don't want to stand in the way of potentially a good idea by getting bogged down right now in the details. It's just, but yeah, it's $1 million, and so I don't know who's willing to pay that for that property for what's potentially a long-term, call it philanthropic, public recreational type use. But so that's that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Let's go into addendum item 240802, and then for the information reports and correspondence, if there's anything in particular we want to look at, great. If not, we can recess.
Sure. Chair Donahue and I are on Panther Team 4
Woohoo.
of the SIFT group. I see Dr. Grimsley is probably paying attention to us online.
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and allow her to participate if she wants to. So Panther Team 4 is focusing on the question of advocacy with the General Assembly on, you know, can we find a way to actually break through and get some more state money? And one of the first questions the group asked ourselves is are we disadvantaged? Are we paying our fair share? Are we getting the right amount from the state? And so we ran the numbers and attached a couple charts, which I think are really telling. And so here's all the school divisions in the state, and they're just by division number. And so this is the amount of operational funding provided by the state per pupil. We get the absolute least amount of any school division in the state.
Well, it's the worst place you'd want to
This
be
is
number
FY
one.
2023. This is the latest superintendent's report data that's available. And I don't expect that when 24 is available that this will change very much. The next one might change. So you can see it ranges from us at $2,000 per pupil up to whatever division 084 at $9,600 per pupil. Actually, I know who that is. I think that's one of our close friends who doesn't have a cap on their supplemental base aid.
So but we're getting 3, I think, in the last fiscal year, the state contributions.
There's different buckets of money. So this is operational funding only, and not any of the capital money or the targeted federal money and all the other thing, right?
Because
just reported in this table.
Okay.
So I didn't want to manipulate a lot of data. I just want to use their data and try to tell a story with their data. So then local operational funding per pupil. So how much do we pay? Are we paying our fair share? Well, we're the 6th highest in the state.
Thank you for validating why I lose sleep at night.
Exactly.
About
and so the lowest is down here around 2,000, and maybe they should be there because it's maybe a really disadvantaged area of the state. I don't know. But there are a handful that are above us and some that are really, really high. So I think the argument can be made that yes, we're paying our fair share, and no, the state is not based on this data. So how do we work with that, knowing that 2 years in a row we've had our delegate introduce legislation for us to try to fix the cap issue, and it hasn't succeeded. And so there have been some conversations during the joint meeting. Should we hire a lobbyist to really put the pedal down and try to push it hard? And so the SIF group has worked on that, and there is a proposal in hand that just came in, I think, Friday, that would lay out this 3-bullet path prong where early in the session, for a $20,000 charge, they would really be going to figure out, is there a viable path here? Can we is there a way to get from here to there without committing for the whole thing? And if during that process it is determined that we can, then there's another chunk of 30,000 to push through that final finish line, hopefully. So we also discussed, well, maybe the community would be willing to help with this. And in order for the community to help citizens, interested citizens who might want to donate money, there need to be a repository for that. That's not the county, that's not the schools. So Headwaters has agreed to be that body that would mix public tax dollars pledged by a locality and any citizen dollars, put them together, and then actually be the contract agent for
Okay.
lobbyists. They've run through their 501c3 rules and found that this is of the size that they could do. So this is an opportunity that was just really fleshed out last Friday with the dollar values, which is why it's an addendum item. I think our meeting was on Thursday where we interviewed two different lobbyist firms. And Dr. Grimsley and I and the SIF team need to know if the board is interested in trying to fund some of this.
And as an addendum item, a vote to approve this requires unanimous support.
Correct, of those present.
I think we should act on this next month. I'm very ill at ease to act on this month. With it being an addendum item, I don't want to kill it. But we have really never hired lobbyists before. And we had a lot of resistance to it when we talked about it or at least I did, in the context of broadband. People did not want to hire a lobbyist.
Okay, well then let's move on because.
I don't want to waste your time and I don't want to kill it.
Yeah, so, yeah, in terms of timing, just for transparency, so we know what we're getting into, if we vote on this next month, does that put us in a bind at all?
Dr. Grimsley spoke with the individual. This first portion of time is September 1, so I imagine September 4 is not all that different.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I mean, I've been a huge advocate for taking this approach. Something has to break open for us to stop being in this, oh, well, it didn't work out again this year cycle. And I have been very vocal about saying, like, sometimes you got to spend money to make money. And I feel like Delegate Weber and others have done an awesome job legislatively to try to make our case. But as we saw from the delegate from Roanoke City, there's concerted opposition to our efforts, and to the extent that someone knows the inside in the Capitol and can come up with a better solution, I think it's a worthwhile investment. But I also appreciate my colleagues' caution on at least reviewing the details of what we're getting into. But I for one, think that the money we're talking about here that we're getting from the state, the burden that is placed on our Rappahannock County local taxpayers, I think, as supported by the very nice graphs that Mr. Curry presented, I think it should put us in a position where we should support some effort along these lines to get something going, because we have been stuck for a long time. And I think we need to exhaust all options, and if we get to the end of this and we're in the same position, so be it. But unfortunately, in my view, we're gonna have to spend some money to find out. So
I just wonder too, given how shameless the opposition to lifting the cap was last year, if the personalities don't change, I don't see the outcome changing. I understand the design, and I believe me, I was the one that said, please reconvene SIFT and let's think of some ways to get this through.
but I don't.
I just wonder if the numbers don't change, if the people don't change, will hiring a lobbyist have any effect?
And I think that's, to your point, I think that's where it's really important for us to spend a little time understanding what the proposal is.
Correct.
And lawyers, lobbyists, trust me, I know from direct experience, lawyers and lobbyists will never guarantee success.
Correct.
Ever. And so the question is, what about this lobbying firm makes us believe that they will be able to affect a change and lead us to an outcome different from what we've experienced absent such support? And I think we need to hear what they have to say. And I think whatever they're proposing obviously needs to take into full account the composition of the state legislature and how they propose to work around that composition vis-a-vis our frustrating entrenched position to date. So,
And I think Dr. Grimsley is going to answer some of that.
If we can hear him.
Go ahead, Dr.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak to this. There has been quite a bit of work done behind the scenes to figure out, if this is a viable option. And I do not know a lot about lobbying and how the politics works behind the scenes in Richmond either. However, we did get a lot of insight from those in Richmond, those who represent us, about good guidance on who to even talk to in this arena. We had 4 firms initially, narrowed it down to 2, and then the one that the SIP team unanimously thought would be wonderful really shed light on exactly what Mr. Whitson and Ms. Smith were saying, that we are going to have to take a very different approach to this, because you're right, the players are kind of the same. But there's a lot of avenues that this particular person does have, inroads and intact relationships with those on certain committees that we need to confer with at this point in time. So there's a lot of education behind it. We learned a lot. So I don't want you to think this was just somebody we're putting before you to consider out of a hat or anything. There was a lot of front work done to bring this one to the forefront.
And Dr. Grimsley, following Supervisor Smith's lead, if we just took the time between now and our September meeting to have a chance to wrestle with this proposal, is that going to put you or the school system in a pickle?
I'm not sure that it's a pickle if they're starting September 1. The person that we've already spoken with from this particular firm has done a lot of conversations already and a lot of homework to, establish a good approach and strategy for us. So I feel like that part's there. So I don't think it will be a big issue, and I just it does help knowing that we do have support, and this was the direction that we remembered that the supervisors and the school board wanted us to look into.
Yeah, I definitely think we need to head in this direction. So you already have my support, but I also respect Ms. Smith and her interest in understanding kind of the overall scope of work and where this is headed. So as long as a slight delay won't derail this effort in any way, then I think we should.
I mean, it would be helpful if there were additional documents or details that could be shared with the board so that we could make an informed decision. I mean, we all understand the problem very well, and nothing would make me happier than freeing up the $1 million that should be flowing already to our students every year. And I'm very glad that SIF team met, but I don't have a report. I don't have any kind of analysis other than the charts that Mr. Curry very kindly put together and some pricing. So I would like to know for $50,000 exactly what we're buying. And I think maybe more importantly, people in the community would like to know for $50,000 what we're buying.
Yeah, my impression, you're buying wisdom of the process, access to people who, knowledge of who to contact, access to those individuals, and as Mr. Whitson said, a guarantee of nothing. What we did hear from the 2 individuals we spoke to was you have to start early. And so these 3 bullets were out of a kind of a preliminary work statement. And so that included September 1. But, my thought is that there's people who are making these decisions aren't fully informed of the facts. And so the starting early is to help them understand the facts, what Rappahannock is and isn't. So delegate from Roanoke City knows what the taxing ability is here as compared to what some metric in some report says, because those reports don't reflect us very well, just like the LCI doesn't reflect
Sure, you
us
can
very
pick
well.
and choose numbers any day.
So that's all I know, is that these individuals know the staffers on the different committees who are integral to what ultimately happens at those committees, and they have access to the various different delegates and senators and which ones are on which committees and are influential, and if you can convince that person, then it goes a long way. Those are things that we really don't know, and quite frankly, I try to stay out of.
Yep. Yeah, and they have relationships that they've built over the years, so they can get in doors that necessarily, if we went down and just knocked on doors, we wouldn't necessarily get to speak to the right people.
Right?
Okay.
Yep.
So we don't have unanimity today, so there's no reason for anyone to put forward a motion.
And I suspect we can have an agreement reviewed by attorneys and whatnot, but it's not our agreement. This would be a Headwaters agreement. And so if the board wanted some sort of agreement with Headwaters, I guess we could formulate something to make sure it's restricted properly.
Sounds good.
Yep. Thank you, Dr. Grimsley. I think the team's been doing a lot of work. All right, we're going to anything on the reports? Anything?
You might want to talk. You might want to go over the drought information just to see what's there, although there's maybe light at the end of the tunnel.
With the hurricane?
Yeah, so now we have to ask to please be sent the emergency services reports at the end of the week, please. Because there's apparently a large amount of rain coming, so please keep us posted on that. It's one extreme or the other.
Yeah. There's also an REC rate notification. They're trying to do something with rates.
Okay.
All right. Recess until 7 o'clock.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Hey, Art.